Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1269 of the War News stream. And what a day it was today. We got to watch Vladimir Putin get bullied in Alaska and also threatened by the U.S. officials with aircraft flying right over his head. We also saw Ukraine destroy a Russian ship carrying weapons to Moscow, and also the Russian advance near Pokrovsk is entirely halted, and now the Russians are encircled, which is a terrible situation for them, but we have massive news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear that the Anchorage, Alaska summit between the President of the Russian Federation and the President of the United States is concluded inconclusively, as it does appear that no agreements of any type about a possible peace in Ukraine was reached, or even the topic appears to have been brought up at all. However, we were able to see that the President of the Russian Federation was openly intimidated by a show of force by the United States Air Force near to the area of the Joint Base Elmendorf earlier today, and we were also able to see that a great deal of disdain was shown to Russian news reporters that were treated like flood victims inside of a stadium in Anchorage, Alaska. We also have been able to hear in significant news that Ukrainian armed forces have officially encircled the Russian armed forces armies north of Pokrovsk, as we were able to hear that the Russian Mirnohrad breakthrough has been countered by the 1st National Guard Corps of the Ukrainian armed forces, and it appears that an entire battalion-level element of the Russian armed forces is now encircled somewhere around the town of Kucherev Yar, as the Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to close off the Mirnohrad Gramp and are now going to be moving to destroying these forces in detail. We have also been able to hear further video and picture evidence showing of deep strikes inside the Russian Federation, striking a Russian oil refinery in Syrien, now as of today officially knocking out nearly a quarter of all Russian oil and fuel production inside of the Russian Federation. We have also been able to see that a large munitions vessel carrying munitions inside the city of Astrakhan was also directly targeted and destroyed by Ukrainian drone attack as well, resulting in a significant explosion, and the foundering of the vessel directly at its moorings. A ammunition plant also appears to have been hit and caught on fire in Ryazan, resulting in a near-apocalyptic type explosion around the surrounding area, completely leveling everything, including the trees near to the surrounding tree lines at the gunpowder factory. Ukrainian armed forces have continued to hold their front lines today and have inflicted high casualties onto the Russian Federation armed forces, while in the Middle East we have been able to hear that more clashes have occurred between the Syrian interim government and the Syrian Democratic Forces, and Israeli airstrikes are still occurring within the southern area of Lebanon. We have pretty significant and large news to cover over the past 24 hours, and of course I do have to say that the results in Anchorage were not as bad as we were originally anticipating, and actually appeared to have come out at a net neutral or a net slight positive, but we'll be getting into all of that detail and all of the other major pieces of news that we have for tonight in great detail throughout the entirety of this stream. Moving on into our first and most important part of the news tonight, we will be heading to the area of Anchorage, Alaska, and specifically the Elmendorf Air Force Base and the Joint Base Elmendorf that is just outside of the northeastern area of Anchorage, Alaska. As many of y'all will know, the President of the Russian Federation and the President of the United States of America met today to engage in talks about the Ukraine war and a possible resolution or end to the conflict. We were able to hear that Russian aircraft were continuing to fly in earlier today, and a American E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft was present in the area conducting orbits just off of the area of Kodak, Alaska, watching and surveilling these Russian aircraft as they were flying in and out of the country, either with Vladimir Putin himself on board or Russian security teams and members of the Russian security detail on board and pre-arriving. We were able to hear that some of the Russian diplomats and reporters were actually brought over on those initial Ilyushin 96 flights that were seen around 36 hours ago, and we were already able to see yesterday at last night's stream that Dmitry Peskov, aka the Rat, was present inside of Anchorage, Alaska, and was wandering around trying to taste some of the finer dining options inside of Anchorage. Nevertheless, we were also able to see that one of Putin's chief negotiators that was going to be present at the negotiation rounds today, his name was actually Kirill Dmitriev, actually almost ended up getting himself killed by a cub before the negotiations began, as he decided to foolishly approach the bear before even seeing if it was friendly or not. We can actually see the negotiator here mindlessly approaching a wild cub bear. It's an adolescent bear. And we see the bear scurrying off as he walks closer, and it appears that he's somewhat flabbergasted that the bear did not like him. It does appear that the Russians are actually...
What a dumb thing to do. Why would you run up to a bear like that in the wild and just expect it to, like, be nice? I would say it's a bear. It's not going to be nice. So I don't know what the hell's up with the Russians doing this type of stuff.
I have no clue. I have no clue either. It was absolutely bizarre. And the guy actually was, just to let you all know, was involved in the meeting that would be later held between the President of the United States and the President of the Russian Federation. And he almost got himself killed before the negotiations by trying to mess around with the local wildlife outside of the city of Anchorage. Nevertheless, Russian reporters also arrived in the country early before the arrival of Putin as well, and were also wandering around the area of Anchorage, Alaska. We were able to hear that, oddly enough, they were getting some incredibly interesting and high-level treatment by the United States of America. As many do know, the United States is ultimately compassionate and also wealthy beyond measure compared to most developed countries around the world. And for this reason, we also like to show off our hospitality to invited guests of the United States of America, including those of the foreign press. Our treatment of the foreign press, as far as foreign policy concerns, truly shows our appreciation and respect for the citizenry of foreign countries like those of the Russian Federation when their foreign press arrives to cover major events and developments inside the United States, including those that were going to be happening here very soon near to the area of Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. We were able to see that Russian journalists were treated to the utmost standards here in the United States of America, as a Russian journalist would show us on film. They were treated to the ultimate sleeping experience, and not only that, were given the finest accommodations that the United States of America could provide, giving the level of standing and respect that the Russian Federation has inside of the United States of America. And we can see that right here.
Ну, здесь спартанские условия. Это что-то от Красного Креста.
The sleeping arrangements were actually provided by none other than the amazing American Red Cross, and we also were able to understand that curtain partitions were made in between the specific sleeping cells of the reporters to ensure that they would not be able to see each other in the middle of the night, as we do know that Russians are spooked when seeing each other in the midst of the night. This apparently was set up in the middle of a stadium inside of Anchorage, Alaska, to ensure that they felt the most at home, generally living in the quality of a refugee, to make them understand the kind of plight or situation that some Ukrainian citizens have found themselves in due to the war in Ukraine, making sure that the Russian citizenry and the Russian foreign press are united in solidarity with the kind of suffering the Russian Federation government is bringing in Ukraine.
И вот так вот у каждого подушечка, полотенчика.
We could see that this goes on throughout the entirety of the stadium's length, and it does appear that the Russian Federation was treated with the utmost respect and largely disgrace, to be entirely honest with y'all, beyond the sarcasm, that the United States could provide. Just to let y'all know, foreign press generally are treated with some deference or respect by the countries that they are visiting, as the respect that they are given generally represents the kind of respect that the host country has for their nation. The fact that we actually housed all of the Russian foreign press within this stadium, largely like a refugee camp or some sort of a emergency camp that FEMA would set up in the midst of a flood or a hurricane, generally shows that we have next to no respect for the Russian Federation or the Russian Federation's foreign press, which already started this off, in my opinion, on the right foot.
Вот такие вот перекрытия. Здесь вот будут спать журналисты в ночь перед важнейшим саммитом.
We can also see the accommodations once again being displayed by the Russian journalists, who are in an absolute dismay at the quality of the conditions that they've been provided for their stay. We can see that this is actually an incredibly nice accommodation.
Интересно. Ну, здесь
But that's the end of the clip right there, and incredibly interesting to see. Beyond that, Matthew, how are you coming in? Are you coming in good or no?
I can hear you now, but I'm not sure what the deal is. It seems like we're having some Discord problems left and right tonight.
Dang, that's unfortunate. Sadly, there isn't really a lot I can do, because the best thing I could do is restart the computer, and the computer was already restarted, like, I think a couple of hours ago. So, unfortunately, there's not really much that we can do. But 1 second, folks, really quickly, I want to make sure that we're able to run the stream as best we can. Give me just a second, folks, and we're going to see, hopefully, we can try and fix the situation that is persisting on Discord. So, hopefully, that is fixing the situation right there, and hopefully, we'll be able to get right back into our news coverage. But moving on from that, and also, Matthew, how is it coming in now?
It's coming in, so hopefully it stays that way.
Hopefully it does. I don't know what's causing that issue, because there's nothing running in the background on the computer, and the computer was actually completely restarted a couple of hours ago, just to completely wipe everything and make sure all the updates were installed, just 3 or 4 hours ago. So it's a little bit weird that that situation is occurring. We also were able to hear that the United States of America even provided further disgrace to the Russian Federation's foreign media by feeding them, according to one of the head spokespeople of Russia Today, Chicken Kyiv. They were fed Chicken Kyiv. On top of being given the Spartan conditions that they were living in, and there was also some additional details of further disgrace that we provided. For example, we laid out food for the Russians like a feed trough, pretty much laying out tuna salad with some loaves of bread, not even unpacked from the wrappings that they were bought from at the local stores, and we also left a giant box of potato chips on the ground for them to feed from, largely like animals. But nevertheless, we also apparently provided them with a lunch that consisted of Chicken Kyiv-style cutlets that were also provided to the foreign press. But enough of how the foreign press and the diplomats were faring before the arrival of Putin. Putin did arrive only several hours later, after the early morning hours commenced, and the Russians that already were there were generally appalled by their treatment. We were able to see that Putin finally did arrive, and the President of the United States also arrived not that long after. After the arrival of both presidents, we were able to see that they began a walk down towards the area of the platform that had been made, and we were able to see that the president of the Russian Federation was greeted by an incredibly interesting sight. Flanking the red carpet on both ends were 4 F-22 Raptors of the Alaskan Air National Guard, a forward response or quick reaction force of the United States Air Force that has been specifically made and designed with the purpose of intercepting and turning around Russian bombers that get too close to Alaskan airspace. While they were walking down the middle of the red carpet, surrounded by the best air superiority fighters on the planet currently, they were then met by the best multi-role aircraft and best stealth bombers currently in service in the United States Air Force as well, the B-2 Spirit and the F-35Bs that also flew overhead. Once again, all three being the finest weapons and implements of the Air Force in each category.
That was crazy, by the way. Honestly, that was super impressive to see that. Really.
Yeah, it was absolutely crazy. It was insane. The kind of intimidation tactic being used here is one that we have never seen before, but this was not a show of respect by a foreign leader, or to a foreign leader. This was more so a sign of intimidation. We rarely ever see, and have actually never seen in the history of foreign policy, at least on this channel, this sort of action being made, but it generally does appear that the Russian Federation was treated with the utmost disrespect as far as we treated their foreign press, and it also appears that the Russian Federation was then further insulted directly to the President of the Russian Federation by conducting a flyover of the most potent multi-role fighters currently in service in the world, the F-35A, and also flanked by the F-22, the best air superiority fighter in the world, and also the best strategic bomber currently in service, the B-2 stealth bomber. So it does appear that this was once again trying to show the technological excellence of the United States Armed Forces, and generally largely showing, at least in a sense, visually, to the President of the Russian Federation that American air superiority is not something to be kidded with or believed or perceived to be a joke. We then were able to see later another clip that was shown off of the airfield itself that was showing the flyover from another angle. This was actually the flyover that was occurring directly over Elmendorf from another angle, about several miles off of Elmendorf Air Force Base, around 2 miles away inside of Anchorage itself. Nevertheless, we were able to hear further developments from the situation. We were able to see that Putin and the President of the United States then met the U.S. press, and the U.S. press was not incredibly keen on the Russian president, and it appears that the President of the Russian Federation, already somewhat jarred or rattled from the experience that he had outside, walking amongst the F-22s, and also having the the multi-role fighters and the stealth bombers fly overhead, appears to have been completely overwhelmed at this point by the questions from the foreign press, and appears to have completely lost his composure, which we were able to see on this clip right here.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Let's go. Come on, guys. Come on, guys. Let's go. Let's go. Thank you, press. Let's go. Thank you, press.
Thank you, press.
The pictures.
He started to yell at the press too, telling them basically enough and stuff like that. Like, he was completely caught off guard by the fact that this is an actual group of journalists here that actually ask questions. He's totally caught off guard by that completely. You can tell. You can tell it was absolutely shocking. Also, Matthew, it sounds like the call quality improved, hopefully permanently. But beyond that, it looks like he was completely shocked and also getting a little bit out of his league at this point by the time that he had made it to where the press was starting to throw questions at him. He actually was what it seems to be scared at this point, because many of y'all will know that keeping composure, at least for Putin's sake, for the cameras, is an incredibly important thing of his. He always makes sure to keep the stone-like appearance in front of the cameras of the press inside of Russia and the foreign press around the world whenever he makes visits, and it appears that the intimidation tactics outside actually got to him, and then the immediate barrage from the press, which is not something that happens inside the Russian Federation, may have actually overwhelmed him at the moment, and he started to lose his composure right on camera and started to make absolutely wild faces. It could only be described as bewilderment or generally fear, one or the other. Nevertheless, the negotiations then continued on that footing, and we were able to hear... Also, I heard that apparently Putin was yelling out to the...
Go ahead.
Yeah, the call's busted, man. I'm just going to let you go ahead.
But moving on from that, we were able to hear that there were no breakthroughs, apparently, between the meeting of the President of the United States and the President of the Russian Federation. As we were able to hear that according to one diplomat, they stated that we are working. So far, there have been no major breakthroughs, and apparently there cannot be any. That was largely from the statement of the Russian ambassador to the United States of America. It does appear that the meeting was one of the longest that's ever occurred between the current president of the United States and the president of the Russian Federation, lasting a little over 2.5 hours, nearly moving on into 3, and it appears that there was absolutely no ground covered or succeeded in being covered inside of the meeting. According to the President of the United States, he stated, "We haven't quite got there, but we've got some headway. There's no deal until there's a deal," generally stating that absolutely no progress had been made at this point in the talks. We also were able to then hear that the Ukrainian state then largely started to say that the meeting was a failure, with the member of parliament Alexander Mereshko stating, "It's a failure." Putin was again talking about security concerns. "I don't see any changes." Outside of that, we also were able to hear that the luncheon that was planned earlier after the talks were supposed to be conducted was also canceled unilaterally by the President of the United States, with the White House staff also stating that the President would be immediately returning to Washington, D.C. without further delay, meaning that the entire meeting was canceled early after the 2.5-hour talk was concluded at the very beginning of the meeting for the greater deal. We were able to hear that officially the talks had ended. We got a short clip of the President of the United States and the President of the Russian Federation in the hallway after the meeting had concluded and everything else had been canceled for the day, and it looks like some level of civility was still trying to be shown, at least at that point. But at this point, it appears that the talks had completely collapsed and there was no progress of going forward, as the Russians had once again been involved in an absolute gridlock. From what we were able to hear, just to give you all a little bit of details and information of what we got inside of the negotiation hall during that time, it actually appeared that the Russian Federation was once again going around its typical round of talks that they did with Tucker Carlson. And to quickly explain last night, we said this is a joke. I actually didn't believe this would happen, but this is exactly what happened. As many of y'all will know, the infamous Tucker Carlson Vladimir Putin interview, Tucker Carlson rambled on for several hours, as a matter of fact, pretty much without end, and pretty much steamrolling Tucker Carlson throughout the entire interview, speaking about the 1,000-year-old history of the Russian people and how the state of Ukraine really did not exist due to the false history that Putin was outlining. He actually gave the President of the United States the identical treatment. From what we were able to hear from inside of the meeting room between the President of the United States and the Russian Federation, Putin just continued to ramble about historical facts and falsehoods that had been made by the Russian Federation to try and legitimize their claim, even going as far to say that the state of Ukraine is an artificial construct and technically should not even exist because of all of the falsehoods that they historically brought up. The President of the United States, instead, was actually trying to speak about the situation as it exists currently and seeing if the Russians would make any sort of a concession or a ceasefire attempt that would actually last, at least for some time. No ceasefire was reached, and Putin continued to ramble about historical facts that generally did not pertain to anything whatsoever. But beyond that, we were able to hear in the meantime, though, that a lot of people were believing that Putin may have been rattled and may have gone on to this entire rant about history, and generally a falsified history at that, because of the B-2 flyover, generally the B-2/F-35A flyover that occurred at Alaska that may have possibly been meant to intimidate the Russian Federation's president. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so we did see in the midst of Putin walking off his plane and walking up to the U.S. president, he did get a flyover by the B-2 bombers, which just got done bombing Iran, of course, which is an ally of Russia, and also some fighter jets flying with it and escorting the B-2 through the area. So clearly, it got Putin's attention. He kept staring up at the sky over and over and over. He clearly saw it. You could hear it. It was super loud and probably left his ears ringing. So was it meant to intimidate or scare Putin, or was it simply an impressive display? And it looks like the audience is split on this topic. About 44% said it was just an impressive display, and 43% said it was meant to intimidate Putin, and 8% said I'm 50-50 on this question. And I would personally say it looked like it was an intimidation tactic, and I would say good on the U.S. for actually doing that, because to me, I think it was pretty cold. I think that was probably a good message to send to Putin to let him know that we do have obviously some very, very powerful and potent equipment that could be used to defend our country one day if Russia decides to go crazy and attack NATO. So I would say it was an intimidation tactic, and much warranted in my opinion, because we are, of course, an enemy country to Russia, and Russia's an enemy country to us. So I'm with the 43%. But Enforcer, What say you?
I would have to say that I'm with the 43%. It does appear that it was meant to intimidate the president of the Russian Federation, and to that extent, it may have actually succeeded, because it does seem that the flyover was not something that was pre-telegraphed to the Russian delegation, and it appears that it actually did take many by surprise. I also have to remind you all that the president of the Russian Federation has never seen in person an F-22 Raptor, a B-2 stealth bomber, or an F-35A Lightning. None of those things have ever been seen by most people inside the Russian Federation in actual person. Seeing those things in real life is something that is supposed to be largely an intimidation tactic to generally try and show and display the kind of power that the United States has at its possession. In short, what this is called in most Air Force metrics is a show of force. This is actually something that was typically done as a deterrent inside of Afghanistan or Iraq during the occupation of either country. If there was actually a believed armed combatant or terrorist that was in the streets or somewhere within a general area, there would be an order given before there would be any sort of fires, at least in some instances, for an aircraft like an F-16 or an F-15 to conduct a low-level pass over the person to try and intimidate them with the raw display of power, and then force them to second-guess their decisions, or pretty much run away in fear of what was being done. This, in a diplomatic sense, that happened today, is the very same kind of a show-of-force display that would have been conducted inside of Iraq or Afghanistan against the Taliban combatant. And I would generally have to say that to that extent, this is something that I would have to say it was a pretty decent move. Not only that, we treated the Russian foreign press as an extension of that with a great deal of disdain, pretty much treating them like refugees for the large part, and not even really providing them with any kind of food whatsoever or any kind of a lavish treatment. For example, making sure that a hotel was cordoned off specifically for them, which generally also showed a great deal of disdain from the U.S.'s side, because plans could have been made and implemented to ensure that the Russian foreign press was treated well during their short stay, to show that the United States government actually had some modicum of respect for the Russians. And even for the president of the Russian Federation, and at large the foreign press of the Russian Federation, we showed absolutely no respect to either extent, and generally were treating them as almost less than human, or also trying to intimidate them with direct shows of force right overhead. So I would have to say that I'm with the 43 to 42% that said it was meant to intimidate the president of the Russian Federation, and it looks like it may have actually done just that. But moving on from that and into the rest of the news that we were also able to hear, we were able to hear that after the talks were officially ended, the luncheons canceled, and everything else that was on the itinerary was completely scratched, the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, then immediately boarded his Ilyushin 96 and then fled from the United States immediately. We were able to hear afterwards that the atmosphere inside of the negotiating room was apparently not quite good, and that's according to first-hand reports from people who were present that were speaking to Fox News later in the day. The atmosphere in the negotiating room was not very good. It seems that everything did not go well. Putin seemed to come and just say everything he wanted to say. These negotiations gave Russia the opportunity to convey its position to the president. Putin, by his arrival, also postponed the introduction of additional U.S. sanctions on the Russian Federation. But however, it did not seem that things went well at all, and it appears that the conclusion of the Anchorage, Alaska negotiation was inconclusive, which generally was expected. We also did expect, at least as a joke, and I'll have to say that this was entirely a joke that we said yesterday, that Putin was going to give the president the Tucker Carlson treatment, and it actually turns out he did give the president the Tucker Carlson treatment, which is absolutely crazy. And hopefully, Matthew, the call quality has improved. I don't really know what's going on with it tonight, and I think it might just generally be a Discord issue, but are you coming through clearly at the moment right now?
Somewhat. I hear like hiccups here and there. There's also a massive delay, so I can kind of hear you and kind of not.
I think it might actually be a Discord issue because your computer was restarted right before, well, during the stream. My computer was restarted just a couple hours before, so I think this might actually be a greater Discord issue for the night, which is very unfortunate, folks, because we're covering some fairly large news, as many of y'all do know, and our call is all over the place at the moment. There's not really a lot I can do, because unless if I wanted to end the whole stream and restart the Discord call and then restart a stream, there really isn't much more that I can do about it, and I already restarted the Discord during the countdown. But beyond that, however, a lot of people have also heard that while the Russian Federation was getting intimidated inside of Alaska today, it appears that the Russian army was being intimidated in a different way inside of Ukraine, as the Russian Munitions breakthrough has completely collapsed as of today officially. The Russian Federation's armed forces, about a battalion tactical group-sized element near to the area of the town of Kucherov Yar, has been officially encircled by the Ukrainian First National Guard Corps. This is the current frontline situation as it exists today. The Russians were pushed out of Zolody Kolodias and Vesely, and the Ukrainian First National Guard Corps was also able to advance through the Russian rear line near to Nove Shakove and Shakove, completely cutting off the Russian armed forces from a retreat, and meaning that the remaining battalion tactical group at Kucherov Yar will be destroyed in detail by the First National Guard Corps over the remaining days. This means that the Munitions breakthrough has officially been broken just about a week after it started, and will not have any further success at all on the front line. This is something that is a little bit important. The Munitions breakthrough was believed by many, including the United States and Ukraine, to be an attempt by the Russian Federation to show that the armed forces of the Russian Federation are incredibly strong, potent, and powerful, and are able to actually dictate the ebb and flow of the battlefield inside of Ukraine, and possibly the ebb and flow of a possible battlefield across the whole of Europe. The Ukrainian armed forces on this very day have proven that that is not the case. The Russian Federation army is weak and can be broken by simple counterattacks by armed forces conducting what Thomas Jefferson would have described as a simple matter of marching. And it does appear that at this moment right now, the remainder of the Munitions breakthrough near to Nove Shakove and south will also be broken up in further detail by the First National Guard Corps, as they are practically deleting every single piece of an advance that the Russian Federation has been able to make over the past week entirely. But outside of that, it does appear that many people are speaking with this in mind, and the outcomes that happen inside of the Russian Federation, which we'll also be getting into here in a little bit, about what's going to be happening for the future of the United States of America and the Russians' positions diplomatically on the possibility of an end to the war in Ukraine. And Matthew, what are a lot of people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like 44% of the audience, the most popular option is that the U.S. will keep pursuing Russian talks, while 32% said the U.S. will probably end talks with Russia very soon, and 19% said it's simply too early to tell right now. And I would say this meeting today fell very, very short. Honestly, I was expecting more to come out of it than what we saw at the very end of the outcome today. I was expecting some type of business deal between the United States and Russia, at least in some sort of capacity or another, but we saw nothing come out of it. And in fact, the U.S. president looked extremely disappointed at the press conference, and it seemed very tense, at least to me it did, at the very end of it. So I would say that the talks are actually probably likely to maybe end, in my opinion. I'm kind of with the 32%. I think the talks are reaching a dead end, because once Zelensky's contacted about this whole situation and is told the details of it, Zelensky's obviously going to reject it. He's not going to accept giving up his land. He's already said that. He's not going to do it. So that is what the Russians are still sticking to, and that's what the U.S. is going to tell Zelensky tomorrow on the phone, and Europe nor Ukraine is going to accept that. So I think we're pretty much dead in the water at this point. There's really nowhere left to go. Putin is sticking to his guns 100%, which is a terrible move to make, because Russia's already on the brink, and he's also showing no logic whatsoever, like usual. So I'm going to be kind of with the 31%. I think the talks are going to end soon. I don't care what the politicians are saying. These talks are pretty much coming to an end, whether they want them to or not. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would also be in agreement with Enforcer Matt and the 31% that U.S. talks with the Russian Federation really can't go farther than here. You can't keep going in roundabout circles with talks and pretend like it's working. At some point, it's a failure. And today did prove that attempting to speak to the Russians is also a failure. We have gone to every single extent so far in the U.S. government to be able to try and find a way to speak reason with the Russian Federation's government to try and find an end to the war. We have tried to force the Ukrainians to do that. The Russians have shown a complete lack of reason. The United States has now directly talked to the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation is still showing a complete lack of reason and judgment. For that reason, there's not a lot more that can be done at this moment by the United States, not even further talks, to try and end this war. No amount of concessions, apparently, are also going to be good enough for the Russian Federation, because we did hear at least some rumors that were issued by the media today that the President of the United States was offering some sort of economic or financial incentives to the Russian Federation to even reach a ceasefire, and still that was not acceptable to the Russian Federation. There's only so far that this can be taken until it completely falls flat on its face. And as of today, I believe that this has fallen completely flat on its face, and any further U.S. attempts at speaking with the Russians, or the Russians speaking with the Ukrainians, is going to be highly unlikely, and if it does happen, or it is conducted, it is going to be entirely fruitless once again, like every attempt at the talks has been, because the Russian Federation is unmoving on its position of unconditional victory at all costs, at the complete disadvantage of the United States of America, which is not a position that peace negotiations can be conducted from, as both sides in a peace negotiation, unless if there is an unconditional surrender, have to be willing to concede certain kinds of points. Like, for example, the Russian Federation would have to concede specific points that it has, like getting a new Ukrainian government or generally installing a puppet state, and the United States and Ukraine would also have to concede that some Ukrainian land would have to be given away. That would be some sort of due consideration by both sides that may actually see that enough compromises are made that the sides meet in the middle and actually have a successful peace agreement. Although that still wouldn't be a good position for the West, it would be one that also isn't that great for the Russians. However, the Russians aren't even willing to meet in the middle. They have to have it entirely their way. Even if we try and incentivize some kind of a compromise, they still are not willing to accept it, and they are only pushing forward to an absolute victory at all costs. They will either achieve that at the negotiating table or on the battlefield, but that is what they are seeking still at this moment, even with the Russian Federation's economy and absolute shambles nearing collapse, and also the Russian Federation's armed forces in Ukraine being broken away at like a crumbling cookie just north of Pokrovsk. There is nothing that's going to stop them from continuing on this war until the Russian Federation is entirely and utterly destroyed, and that is what we saw today with the direct meeting between the President of the United States and Putin.
And also another thing as well that I noticed today, y'all might have noticed at the very end of the press conference, the president looked dejected, he looked depressed, and he looked very frustrated and tired as well. I suspect that behind closed doors, Vladimir Putin was probably talking his head off about the history of the Russian Federation, probably intentionally to wear him down like he did with Tucker Carlson. It was probably the same thing going on behind closed doors, because it seemed like, and we heard reports from some reporters, that the mood inside the room, the negotiating room, was very tense. It was also not a very good mood whatsoever, despite what the Russians were saying. It was very ominous, like the whole mood of the talks and things like that. So it seemed to me like this did not turn out the way the U.S. was hoping for whatsoever. And like I said, I was expecting something to come out of it, but it literally fell so flat that they didn't share any type of details whatsoever when the whole press conference ended. So that told me that whatever came out of it was literally simply Putin showing up. He reissued his demands to the U.S. once again, and that was the end of the story. Nothing was achieved beyond that. So it's really quite wild.
I would say that's absolutely wild. It's crazy to think that that was what happened today. The Russians didn't meet a compromise. They got intimidated. Their foreign press got treated like absolute trash, and then they left. It was not really a good sort of an outcome whatsoever. And so with that, we are going to be moving on into our next segment of the news, as we have been able to hear some other major developments that have been coming from inside of Ukraine, speaking particularly about the Pokrovsk front and the Mirnorad breakthrough. And we were able to hear that within this area, the Russian Federation did suffer significant losses over the course of the day, and of course, pretty much the entirety of the front within this area. We were also able to hear, at least an additional detail, that the famous Fighting 93rd was also in the area today, operating drone forces and their armed forces on the ground to be able to try and push the Russian Federation back. From what we understand, a lot of this footage was made around the Kucherev Yar area of the village, and appears to have been wildly successful, at least in knocking out a large amount of the fighting ground power of that BTG that was around that village. And we can see here in these clips the Russian Federation being targeted and pretty much wiped out in detail today by the 93rd. Pretty much the destruction in detail is already being conducted against the Russian forces that are trapped in the Kucherev Yar pocket. We see that they also took some prisoners. This guy's actually wearing a shirt that says Memphis, Tennessee. The Russians hate America so much, they've got to have all kinds of wonderful things that remind them of home. The United States, of course, like Memphis, Tennessee, or other things like that. It's a great, wonderful thing to see. The Russians, they know what home looks like, and it's not old Volgograd, it's Memphis, Tennessee. But we can see here the Ukrainians, of course, speaking about the prisoners that they captured today during the 1st National Guard's breakthrough of the Russian lines, of course, encircling an entire BTG near Kucherev Yar. We can also see them holding the sign of one of the towns that they retook today. I can also see one of the prisoners here being spoken to and also giving his details and information. But that's the end of the clip, and it does appear that it was a very successful push by the Ukrainian armed forces today. Not only that, we were also able to confirm that more Russians were captured from the area, like we just saw in the clip from the 93rd Brigade, and it does seem that the Russian Federation is continuing to meet a great deal of defeats at the front line, at least at this point. From what we are understanding, the Russian Federation's breakthrough north of Munitions has completely failed, which means that the front line is entirely focalized again around the town of Novotroitske and also near to the area just east of Munitions. Ukrainian armed forces, for this reason, will most likely be able to hold the city of Pokrovsk for well over a year at this point, as both major supply highways are once again largely open to the provision of supplies and reinforcements into the city of Pokrovsk, and also the Russian Federation is not able to threaten greater defensive lines behind Pokrovsk like the ones at Dobropilya. So it does appear that the Russian Federation has lost its only card that it had on the table going into the negotiations today in Anchorage, which was that the Russian Federation was advancing rapidly on the front. As of this very day, the very moment that Putin arrived in Alaska, the Ukrainians completely broke that advance and are now pushing it back towards where it started, near to the village of Vrozny and Novotoretske. We also were able to see the Ukrainian armed forces inside the city of Pokrovsk itself were also clearing out Russian saboteurs as a part of the 7th Assault Corps, which we can see in this clip right here. We see the Ukrainians driving around Pokrovsk. And from what we've been able to understand, Russian saboteurs have started to enter the city dressed as plainclothes civilians and are attempting to conduct sabotage operations against the Ukrainian armed forces defending the town. For this matter, the Ukrainians have started to put soldiers onto pretty much anti-partisan patrols through the city to try and find Russian saboteurs and eventually detain them, or if found pretty much in the act of conducting espionage due to the rules of war, most likely summarily executing some. But that's the end of the clip, and it does appear the Ukrainians are keeping a pretty iron-tight grip on the city of Pokrovsk at the moment, and that it will take a great deal longer for the Russian Federation to be able to uproot the Ukrainian defenders from the city if they ever really can. Moving on out of the Pokrovsk front, however, and on into the rest of the news that we have from around the Russian Federation, we have been able to hear of some other major developments that occurred during the historic Ukrainian drone attacks that started yesterday, and a lot of the damage was accumulated today. But before we get into that, I do want to speak about the Pokrovsk front a little bit farther, because a lot of people were believing that Munitions breakthrough was going to be the beginning of the end for the Ukrainian army, and that the Ukrainian army was simply too weak and incapable of defending its fronts, and not only that, stopping further massive Russian advances. At least that's how some people put it. However, as of today, it appears that the Russian Federation's advance was completely destroyed, and is now being pushed back rapidly with an entire battalion captured or largely stuck behind Ukrainian lines and now being destroyed in detail. Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so it looks like 73% said Russia is incapable of advancing, while 11% said it seems like it's close but needs some more info, and only 8% said Ukraine merely got lucky on this one. And this was a very concerning advance when we first saw it. A lot of people were very worried about it, and they thought that maybe the Ukrainians had left this area of the front open, and the Russians were going to plow their way through this area and start taking massive gains to this territory. But it turns out that not only has Ukraine halted the advance, but now they're encircling Russian troops in that advance right here into this territory. So it turns out the Ukrainians have pulled off what some would say is a miracle here, and they've somehow cut them off and they started taking prisoners. They've also started retaking their ground and encircling the Russians, which was not expected, in my personal opinion, whatsoever. So I think this is proof that after the Russians literally throw everything they have at a certain area, which was this spot right here, they threw the kitchen sink at it, trying to take some land extremely quickly, going into these peace talks in Alaska. I would say Russia is incapable of advancing at this point, because if they can't do it here after throwing everything they've got at it, then why should they be able to do it pretty much anywhere along the front line? So I went at 72%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm also with the 72%. It does appear that the Russian Federation is incapable of any larger or significant advances at this point inside of the state of Ukraine due to their complete lack of any sort of offensive capability. From what we understand, the Russian Federation is pretty much completely at the end of its ropes. They have really no ability to support any sort of major breakthroughs or offensives, and we already knew that because the information coming out earlier on during the breakthrough was that this breakthrough was being conducted entirely by dismounted foot infantry that was not being supported by armor or artillery. For that reason, this offensive was completely doomed to fail, and it does appear that it is completely failing even at this moment right now. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, I see a lot of people talking about the coal issue with Enforcer Matt. I do hear it as well, but it's not an issue on his end. It's not really an issue on my end, from what I can tell. It's just a Discord issue. Discord every once in a while does mess up like this really badly. Every once in a while they have a bit of a server issue. And it appears that that might be the case tonight, at least from what I can tell, because yesterday the calls were working fine. My computer was reset today. I completely shut down and restarted and everything rebooted onto it, just for the fact of making sure that everything was updated and running, because that rarely ever happens, because the computer is almost always on, and I'm always working or doing something on the computer. So, unfortunately, this is a really aggravating issue. As many of y'all know, the old saying goes, the show must go on, and there's not really a lot that I can do on my end unless we wanted to shut down my computer and completely end the stream. And that's something that we generally would not like to do, because that means that the show is practically ended at that point. So we're trying to work through it the best we can. It's as aggravating to me and Enforcer Matt as it is to all of y'all, and it's really annoying that it's happening on this day, because this is a major news day and a major news development day. So as people say, the show must go on, but trying to explain it once again to folks just so that we all know, unfortunately, there's not really a lot that we can do about the situation right now on air without me becoming an IT guy and practically giving up the fact of running a show. So with that, we are going to be moving on into the rest of the news that we have tonight. But before we get on into that, we do actually have a couple of questions from the chat that we want to make sure to answer before we move on into the next segment. So Matthew, what do we got?
I think you better take it from here. I was lagging too much.
Okay, so let me go and try and get the spreadsheet really quickly, and let's see here, folks. Let me go and get it really quickly, because this wasn't something that I planned for tonight, so I didn't really set up to be able to take over immediately. So give me just a second, folks. It's always really aggravating whenever technical issues pop up like this. Entirely out of our control, at least from what I can tell at the moment. Seems to be more of a Discord issue than anything. Let me check that really quickly off screen. Actually, weirdly enough, it's saying that my voice call is connected generally fine. So I do not know what's going on with that. It's not an issue on Matthew's end. It doesn't look like an issue on my end. Anyways, moving on from that, we are going to be getting some questions before we move on into the next segment. And our first super chat of the night was from the Martian, who threw in 100. Hey! And the Martian said, "What a complete mess, LOL." And I got to thank you for the massive support, the Martian, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. I got to thank you massively once again for helping this channel to keep on running, and I got to say that the negotiations in Anchorage were expected to have nothing come out of them, because we already knew that the Russians were going to be unmoving on their position, and that no compromises were going to be accepted, and most importantly, we also knew that the European Union and Ukraine would not accept any sort of a peace deal that came out of this, even if it did, as it most likely would involve significant compromises on the behalf of the state of Ukraine and the European Union to achieve some sort of a peace, which is something that they would never accept. So I would generally have to say it went about as good as it could have gone. The worst case scenario was that a peace deal was reached that would have pretty much put the West at a severe disadvantage, and that would have been pretty much attempted to be forced onto the Ukrainians, but instead absolutely nothing came out of it, and it does appear that the United States may be getting once again a little bit of a deeper understanding, at least at the moment, on what's going on on with the Russian Federation and the fact that the Russian Federation is a nation that really can't even be negotiated with at this point. But beyond that, I do thank you incredibly for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to keep this thing running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are moving on to the next one, which is a $100 super chat from Brittany Taz. Hey, another old guard and a channel legend, just like the Martian. And Brittany Taz said, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Remember, Nicolia, miles to go before you sleep." And I thank you for the support, Brittany Taz. I do not know what that is, what that poem is supposed to be about, but I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because it is a great thing to know that folks like you are supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, because folks like you help to make this thing possible. And I actually see a lot of people saying that they absolutely love that poem. And crazily enough, folks, I've never actually heard of that poem before. We were introduced to a lot of poems in public school here in Alabama, but it doesn't really seem that we were introduced to a lot of them, because we've never heard of that one. But I do thank you massively once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing on air and keep covering major news like we are right now tonight. And so with that, a massive thanks to you so much once again, Brittany Taz. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, which is a $129 super chat from LC39A. Hey, and a huge shout out to LC39A for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. As LC39A said, Russian soldiers need better dental care. LOL. And I would have to say they probably do. A lot of Russians actually have their teeth practically like rotting out of their mouth due to a lack of dental care inside the Russian Federation, or a lack of dental knowledge that the average Russian citizen has, which is a little bit wild, because I thought that their whole thing about the Soviet Union was about improving the quality of life, but it doesn't really seem that it improved their quality of life much, and then the Russian Federation hasn't really done a lot to further the improvement of the quality of life either. But still, I got to thank you massively for support, LC39A, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this channel possible and keep this thing rolling. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I possibly can. And of course, a massive thanks to everyone who's been supporting the channel so far tonight and helping it to keep on running. And I also got to give a huge shout out to the 13.7 thousand people who are still here right now, and the 16.1 thousand people who are here at the peak tonight. Well, I've got to massively thank y'all so much so far for being here on stream with us tonight, even in the midst of the technical difficulties that we were dealing with, because folks like y'all are a great honor to have. I'm sorry, everyone, that I sound like I'm not really focused. I'm trying to sit here and think about 9 million things with the technical difficulties and everything else in mind, and there's a whole bunch going on with that I'm trying to figure out at the moment mentally in my head on how to keep this thing rolling, considering that it's now pretty much a one-man band since Matthew is the one doing everything administratively. I'm trying to figure out how to do this all on air with managing all of the stuff and not really having a lot to work with. Usually I have some pre-preparation to do that, trying to do that on the fly tonight. But I do thank you all so much for watching. If y'all are enjoying so far, please make sure to subscribe, make sure to like and comment. We would love to have y'all here. And beyond the technical difficulties, which hopefully will be fixed by tomorrow, we will be running this channel normally every single day at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, every single day except for Mondays, all the time. And so with that, it is time for us to move on into the remainder of the news that we have tonight. And also, really quickly, folks, if you have thrown in the super chat, we do address every single super chat before the end of the night, but we only address 3 during this question segment, and then we address the rest of them after the end of the entirety of the news that we have to cover today. So moving on from that, and on into the area of the Russian Federation, we have been able to hear of significant strikes that have been conducted within the Russian Federation by Ukrainian drone strikes overnight. We have been able to hear that within the city of Astrakhan, a Russian vessel that was actually moored on the side of the Volga River, apparently being loaded with Russian munitions or offloading munitions into the Russian Federation, was actually directly hit, exploded, and then rapidly sank at its moorings. We actually got some pictures of that vessel today. Apparently it was the vessel Olia 4 that appears to have been directly hit, apparently carrying Iranian munitions, and it rapidly sank inside of the port. We also have a video showing the wreckage of the ship after it went well under the water from the explosion, and apparently it blasted some significant breaches within the hull and made it sink rapidly within the port.
И я в
Вчера
шоке.
бомбили, истребители летали, танкер, блядь, нам вчера разбомбили, блядь, вы посмотрите. Охренеть, блядь.
We see the ship completely burned, most of the vessel entirely submerged as well, except for the superstructure poking out over the water.
Я вообще в шоке, нахуй.
И вон дым идет еще.
Хуя, бля. Вот это натуре. Чикаго.
Вон дым горит еще.
Отдыхает Чикаго. Он горит, он еще горит в корме. Давай поехали, поедем, посмотрим.
Горит еще.
We see him continuing to move around the sunken vessel, showing off the absolute damage that it took from the explosion of the munitions on board when it was hit.
Он горит, он еще. Догорает остатки он. Все. Металл. Это просто нормально, нормально. Это просто металл, вон горит он. Давай еще вот это натуре.
But that's the end of the clip, and still showing us the significant damage that the Oleafor took from the explosion. Generally, to tell you a little bit more of details about the story, apparently the vessel was carrying munitions into the area of Astrakhan, and apparently actually cast its anchor inside the Volga River to wait for an ability to offload its cargo. During that time, a Ukrainian drone attack occurred, and one of the Ukrainian drones struck directly into the side of the ship, exploding the munitions inside, and apparently breaching the hull in multiple areas. This resulted in the ship taking on water rapidly and sinking from the stern into the water. We now understand that most of the vessel actually has taken on water and most of the ship has actually settled onto the bottom of the river, with only the superstructure and some other elements of the ship poking out from above the water. This means that a large amount of Iranian munitions was actually completely destroyed before it was ever used by the Russian Federation or even offloaded into Russia from its Iranian port of origin. This is a significant loss for the Russian Federation, and probably enough munitions that were lost to support an entire brigade's operations for several weeks on the Ukrainian front line. A major loss of ammunition that we saw inside of Astrakhan. Speaking of a loss of munitions, we also are able to see the Russians are losing a little bit of their ability to produce munitions from inside of the Russian Federation, as we were able to see inside of the Ryazan Oblast that a gunpowder plant also was directly hit by the Ukrainian armed forces today, which suffered from a catastrophic explosion which entirely destroyed the gunpowder plant, which we could see in this clip right here. This was the beginning of the explosion. We can, of course, see it's an incredibly violent one of the gunpowder that was inside of the elastic gunpowder plant, and we were then able to see another clip here showing the explosion from another angle. Of course, a very significant explosion. From what we were able to hear, apparently a Ukrainian drone directly impacted the facility and ignited the gunpowder stores that were inside of the building, which then resulted in the rapid explosion that we saw right here, which was apparently incredibly violent and, of course, burned wildly hot on the ground and resulted in the practical complete destruction of the gunpowder plant and the surrounding area. This is actually what was at ground zero of the gunpowder factory after the explosion had finally subsided several hours later. It was completely destroyed.
Тут ни одно, ни два здания. Тут пиздец.
You see the smoke still rising from some of the facility that's in its last bits of smoldering wreckage. But this gunpowder factory was absolutely entirely destroyed, quite literally to cinders and splinters. You can also see a duplicate of the clip right here that we included just in case the first one ended up failing. Nevertheless, it appears that the Russian Federation lost a significant amount of its munitions today, both at the Ryazan munitions plant and also on the Olan 4 that was inside of the harbor of Astrakhan in the Volga River. Both of these losses are not going to be felt immediately by the Russian armed forces, but they will be felt later on, several months down the road, as Russian munitions shortages possibly start to grip the Russian armed forces in multiple different elements and start to result in them having a lesser amount of fire per day and also a lesser ability to even conduct defensive or offensive operations, which already are struggling at this moment in time on the Ukrainian front. We also were able to hear other major news that not only came out of Ryazan and Astrakhan, but out of the area of Sirzan in the Samara Oblast. The city of Sirzan is one that we have actually touched on a little bit before and have covered before, as Sirzan is home to another somewhat significant oil refinery within the Russian Federation. Oil refineries are incredibly important for strategic production of Russian fuel sources and also the Russian Federation's ability to manage their economy and also wage war. Petroleum products are incredibly important to everyone's energy infrastructure in the modern age, and the Russian Federation is no exception to that rule. The Russian Federation generally produces one of the largest amounts of crude oil in terms of millions of barrels per day in the world, around 15.5 million, which is neck and neck with Saudi Arabia currently, but comes nowhere close to the United States of America's 27 million barrels per day. Nevertheless, the Russian Federation, while being a massive producer of crude oil, only has enough refineries in their country to be able to refine their crude oil into the exact amount of fuel that is needed in the Russian Federation every single day, with a little bit extra, which is then added into the strategic fuel reserve for the Russian Federation. This fuel production is incredibly important in keeping the economy and the Russian Federation at large operational. While the price of crude oil remains at a base rate globally and rises and drops as a unified price, the actual price of fuels such as gasoline, aviation-grade jet fuel, and others can actually rapidly skyrocket and decrease with the amount of available fuel sources that are out on the open market. Meaning that if the Russian Federation continues to run out of refined fuel, such as gasoline, diesel, or aviation-grade jet fuel, the actual cost of those goods is going to start to skyrocket. This means that the Russian Federation's economy will start to gradually slow down as prices increase and people buy less and less due to the increasing costs, and this also means that the Russian Federation's armed forces are having to deal with the increasing costs of fuel and the lack of available fuel resources throughout the country, meaning that this is actually one of the easiest and most direct ways in causing the Russians a deadly blow to their warfighting abilities and also their economic abilities as well. The Ukrainians ended up hitting the Sirzan refinery overnight, and the fire was absolutely significant. We were able to see multiple videos coming out of the fire, the first one being seen here. And we also were able to see some other clips as well, showing the significant fires inside of the Sirzan refinery, which we can see right here.
Могу ошибаться, но, по-моему, опять ЛТ-6. Как-то так. Пиздец.
We also were able to see another clip of the fire at Sirzan once again.
Дроны летают, да. Он сбивает.
Ты чё плачешь? Ты чё плачешь?
Да. Бля, дронов-то до хрена.
Смотри, сколько дронов.
Это не дроны.
Что?
Это сбивает, чем дроны.
And we also were able to see one last little bit of picture and video evidence actually showing that there was some sort of repair work being done or construction work on this particular part of the refinery, most likely still attempting to repair damage from the last Ukrainian attack at Sirzan. And we can see that the scaffold, as well as the specific towers inside of this area, were completely charred from the fire and impact of the Ukrainian drone. So it appears that they'll be going back to square one on those renovations. Good thing they have the scaffolding already in place around the building. But, nevertheless, it does appear that this drone attack was wildly significant, And it does appear that the Russian Federation is continuing to have a chronic issue with the Ukrainians being able to strike and destroy critical infrastructure across the entirety of the Russian Federation. And with this in mind, Ukraine did strike and destroy a Russian ship allegedly carrying weapons to Moscow inside of Astrakhan. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts and comments on this at the moment. And so, to see if the call quality is working well at this moment, Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so I doubt the call's working properly, but if you can hear me, though, it looks like 36% said Russia will do nothing in response, while 35% said Russia will start targeting Ukrainian ships in response, and 18% said they might issue a strong statement toward the Ukrainians about attacking their ship. So I would say, generally speaking, I believe the Russians will probably do nothing in response, because in reality, there's really nothing to do. They try to target maybe the Ukrainian grain ships or those ships again, but they're already kind of doing that as it is right now. So I don't really think there's anything they can do except for basically start issuing really strong threats toward Ukraine and let that be the end of it. So I'm with the 37%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 37% as well. I think that the Russians are probably going to do just about nothing in response. So far, Ukrainian drone attacks are so numerous in number, practically happening on a every other day basis, and also conducting such serious damage that this particular incident will most likely not be responded to at all. This is just one of the many major attacks that the Ukrainians have conducted against the Russians that are starting to build up damage significantly against the Russian Federation and its warfighting abilities. So I generally have to be with the 37% as well. I don't really think there's going to be a lot coming out of that particular attack as far as the Russian response is concerned. But as far as the impacts that are being seen in the Russian Federation due to these attacks, those sorts of impacts are going to be incredibly significant, as it does appear that the Ukrainians are still conducting massive drone attacks and still racking up impressive amounts of damage against the Russians. If they continue on with this ability to do this, we will see that the Russian Federation's refining abilities and possibly even their munitions availability starts to decrease rapidly, meaning that not only does the Russian economy and military come to pretty much stop due to the lack of available fuel sources, but they may also come to a complete stop in the fighting due to a lack of munitions, pretty much bringing the Russians down to the Ukrainian level of fire per day, and reaching firepower parity, not by providing the Ukrainian armed forces with more firepower, but by decreasing the amount of firepower that the Russians actually have available on the front line on any given day. Nevertheless, we will be moving on out of the Russian Federation and on into the Ukrainian front lines, as we have been able to see significant developments within this area as well, as we were able to hear of major Russian losses. And I'm going to give the 20 seconds of downtime needed for Matthew to give a response, because the Russians lost 3 Bobcat skid steers today.
Hey, look at that. They lost 3 of them. I tell you what, the son of a bitch Discord doesn't work, but I tell you what, I'm glad to see 3 Bobcats taken out. That is a good thing to see today. I got to say a big old yeah.
And look at that. Wasn't it wonderful to have Enforcer Matt on air for 10 seconds? It was a great thing to have. Talk about 30 seconds. We had to get the message to him by carrier pigeon. Oh, Discord, sowing discord amongst our community. The calls don't really work all too well. We'll have to figure out why that's happening. I don't know why that's happening. Why is it happening? People go, sir, why is it happening? I have no clue. It's getting on my nerves as much as it's getting on Enforcer Matt's. I just have to keep a straight face, because if I don't keep a straight face, this whole thing falls apart. But beyond that though, it is a very great thing to hear. 3 Bobcat skid steers lost. Not bad at all. But Miss Decent, keeper of the records, also stated that troop loss drops on average again. Only 1 day in the past week above 1,000. We also were able to hear that the Russian Su-30M SM multi-role fighter jet down in the Black Sea was actually reported on today's casualty report. Other categories are near averages, and vehicles are slightly above average. But nevertheless, we were able to hear that 940 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 3 APCs, 140 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 40 artillery pieces, 147 drones, 1 MLRS, 1 aircraft, the Su-30SM that crashed inside the Black Sea, and 3 Bobcat skid steers. A very impressive day, and a good one, for the armed forces of Ukraine. But moving on from that, and out of that area of the front lines, we have not been able to get any video or picture evidence from the Kupiansk front, or or the Severonsky Forest or the Seversk front today, but we were able to see the Ukrainian armed forces were continuing to strike at and destroy Russian forces near to the area of Soledar as a part of the 30th Mechanized Brigade, which has pretty much been fighting in this area since the beginning of the war. And I see a lot of people, also I see loads of people talking about, apparently there's been Discord issues throughout the entirety of the day. I have not been on Discord all day to know, but I do know that a couple of weeks ago there actually was just crippling issues across all of Discord, because after the stream was over, I entered a group chat with some other people on Discord, and it was also doing very poorly, so it might just be an issue with Discord. It happens from time to time. Systems can't work at 100% efficiency all the time. It's just very annoying the few times that they don't, and that might be tonight. But we'll have to see.
How am I sounding right now? How am I sounding?
You're sounding fine. Like, when you talk, you sound fine. It's just that, like, you know, it takes like 20 seconds for the message to come through. It's like carrier pigeon speeds almost.
So I've still got a delay right now because I started talking once you finished.
Yeah, you still have a delay. It's getting a lot shorter now, though. It's like 5 or 4 seconds, but it's still a noticeable delay. Well, I guess he did not respond to that last one, because I was just sitting there waiting for a response. I was like, I guess he's not saying anything to that one. But beyond that, it does appear that the 30th Brigade did inflict a significant damage onto the area around this little facility near Soledar. And that's the end of the clip, but very nice to see. And slow, baby! Slow! But moving on from that and past the Pokrovsk front, considering that we covered that situation earlier on in the day, we are going to be moving on down into the area of Kherson, as we were able to see Russian forces getting cooked in their positions, as it appears they were quite toasty today.
Пидорасы.
Пидорасы, he says, as he watches the fire in the woods.
Ёб твою мать. А мы не успеем.
We see them continuing to film the fire in the trees.
Короче, спасаем только вот келью. Все, верховой пошел. Те блиндажи там, где БПЛАшники.
We see them continuing to show the fires around the surrounding area.
Вот. Раковина сгорела, старая. Гаражи сгорели, старые. Короче, пиздец. Генератор тоже сгорел, не успели, блин.
You see them all sitting around, kind of in shock that their positions are just burning in a forest fire at this point.
Блядь. Пизда.
And that's the end of the clip, but it appears that Enforcer Matt has gotten down to the bottom of the issue. It's not my computer, and it's not Enforcer Matt's computer. Discord is just mostly down right now, so that is actually where the issue is coming from. It's not a technical issue, because usually there are a lot of accusations thrown around in the background by Enforcer Matt and me that it's the other's computer that's causing the issue, just to be entirely honest with y'all. That's, and sometimes it's actually the case. Like, I'll be like, it's your computer, and sometimes, very rarely, it'll actually be Matthew's computer, and then sometimes you'll say, it's your computer, and sometimes, a little bit more so than very few times, it is an issue, and it's a problem on my end, but it appears that Down Detector is saying the Discord's having just an insanely large amount of outages today. And isn't that the greatest day to have it? In the middle of the Anchorage, Alaska meeting, which is big news, isn't that the worst day to have a Discord outage on? You know, considering that we use it, you know, it's just, you know, it's why in the world does that have to be the case? Why does that have to happen? Why does it have to happen? And so we'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see on that. But also, it appears that my device needs to restart for an update. I just saw that down there, which is a little bit odd because I completely restarted the computer today, and it said that it installed all the updates, and it stopped me from getting on the computer immediately because it said it was. So apparently it didn't install all of them, and I have to do it again. So that's interesting to see. But beyond that, upgrades, people, upgrades. Moving on out of the state of Ukraine, however, and on down to the Middle East for a small little update. Before we get on into that update, though, we've got a little pause poll. We've got a little poll. It's like a Polish guy, but little. But it's a poll that we asked all of you all in the chat. And a lot of people have been talking about, do you believe a war with Russia or NATO is imminent based on Putin's current actions? And Matthew, what are you thinking about this? And what is everyone else thinking about this?
All right, so it looks like 47% of the audience said no, Russia does not want war with NATO, while 30% said yes, Russia is preparing to attack NATO, and 18% said it seems like it, but it's too early to tell. And I'll be honest, it really seems like what Putin is doing right now is it's basically like what Adolf Hitler did back in the day, or literally 12 months before he invaded Poland. He went around telling all the European leaders that he wants peace, and it turns out he was lying, because 12 months later he invaded Poland and kicked off World War II. So I think Putin is doing the exact same thing. He is also trying to dupe the West into believing that he's a peace lover when he's not. He really wants to start a war with NATO. So I'm with the 46%. I think Russia is trying to go for a war with NATO, but they're trying to get past Ukraine first and see how that goes before they actually pull it off. But Enforcer, what say you?
They're trying to dupe the West, you say? Is that what you're saying, eh?
Yes.
Oh, I see. And I would have to agree. I believe that the Russians are trying to dupe the West. I would have to agree. And I would have to be, for that reason, considering Carrier Pigeon got the message off to Matthew and then back to me. I would have to say that this Discord issue, folks, is ridiculous in one way, but also hilarious in another, because it takes so long for the message to get back from one of us to the other. But beyond that, I would have to say that I would have to be with the 31%. I actually would believe, based off of all of Russia's actions, there is still a plausible cause to believe that or probable cause to believe that the Russians are actually preparing for a larger conventional war with NATO, as that probably would be a all chips in sort of a play by the Russians, where it's pretty much all or nothing at that point. They either end up winning the gamble or they end up losing it tremendously, I would assume. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, because I would actually have to be with the 31%. So with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And now, folks, moving on down into the Middle East, while we get on into all the major news from the Middle East, it's time for us to get on into that big news from the Middle East. There hasn't really been a lot of big news from the Middle East today. I'm just kind of like blowing this out of proportion. There hasn't really been a lot that happened, but there's some small updates just to make sure we keep track of what's going on down here. So, getting on into them, around the Deir ez-Zor area, we have been able to hear that firefights have once again broken out between the SIG and the SDF. And that's the end of that clip. We can hear the faint sounds of firefights in the distance, and we were able to see that the Israelis are continuing to airstrike Lebanon. Southern Lebanon in particular, trying to hit the Hezbollah forces that are within that area. So with that, it does appear that it is a interesting thing to see, and it does appear that once again the stability in Syria is incredibly fragile, if not non-existent, and the Israelis are continuing their actions against the terrorist forces of Hezbollah and Hamas. And so with that, folks, having covered every single thing in the news today, from Alaska to Ukraine, to the Middle East, to the Volga River region of Russia, it's now time for us to move up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1,269 of the war. So, without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Коротко про сьогодні. Звісно, отримую доповідь від нашої розвідки, від дипломатів про підготовку зустрічі на Алясці, про те, з чим їде Путін. Ми отримуємо також доповідь з регіонів України після російських ударів. Суми, російський удар по центральному ринку, Дніпровщина, удари по містах та підприємствах, Запоріжжя, Херсонщина, Донеччина, свідомі російські удари. Війна триває саме через те, що немає не тільки наказу, але й сигналів про підготовку Москви завершувати цю війну. В день перемовин вони теж вбивають, і це багато говорить. Напередодні ми обговорили зі Сполученими Штатами Америки, з європейцями, що дійсно може спрацювати. Усім потрібне чесне закінчення війни. Україна готова працювати максимально продуктивно, щоб завершити війну. Сподіваємось на сильну позицію Америки. Все буде від цього залежати. Росіяни зважають на американську силу. Саме на силу. Продовжуємо координацію з нашими партнерами в Європі. Говорив сьогодні з президентом Франції Макроном. Команда також контактує. Різниця в часі з Аляскою 11 годин. Тож завтрашній день для всіх в Європі почнеться рано. Готуємось до відповідних розмов. Росія має закінчити війну, яку сама ж і почала. І затягувала на роки. Припинення вбивств потрібне. Зустріч лідерів потрібна, щонайменше Україна, Америка, російська сторона. Саме в такому форматі можливі ефективні рішення. Гарантії безпеки потрібні, тривалий мир дуже потрібен. Всі знають ключові цілі. Я хочу подякувати кожному, хто допомагає досягти реальних результатів. Провів ставку і про ситуацію зараз на фронті, у забезпеченні нашої армії, а також довгостроково армія має бути контрактною. І перехід до саме цього має початись вже зараз. Головком доповів про наші активні дії, всі напрямки, особливо Покровський та Запорізький напрямки. Українські воїни вичищають від окупанта позиції в районі Добропілля, і це дуже важливо. Є результат. Російський намір був показати силу перед Аляскою. Фактично для окупанта це закінчується його знищенням. Я дякую нашим 79-й та 82-й десантно-штурмовим бригадам, які воюють саме там, які воюють на напрямку Добропілля. 2-й батальйон 92-ї окремої штурмової бригади. Дякую вам, хлопці. 14-та бригада оперативного призначення Національної гвардії України. Дякую хлопцям з Азову. Також 32-га окрема механізована бригада, 38-ма бригада морської піхоти захищають позиції саме там, на Донеччині. Дякую всім вам. Також вдячність 1-му та 425-му штурмовим полкам. Відзначу наших воїнів на Сумщині. Це передусім 95-та бригада, 225-й штурмовий полк. Дякую. Сьогодні ж провів нараду з нашими дипломатами Міністерства закордонних справ, команда Офісу. Ми розраховуємо на парламентську дипломатію. Подякував сьогодні голові парламенту Руслану Стефанчуку за його активність. Зараз маємо на наступні місяці оновити план зовнішньополітичної роботи. Доручив провести аудит роботи з партнерами в рамках оборонних коаліцій, коаліцій стійкості всіх наших домовленостей. Все має працювати. І також доручив визначити конкретних відповідальних за кроки на основних наших напрямках. Є конкретний проект з партнерами, має бути конкретна людина, яка відповідає за успіх цього проекту. В понеділок я очікую доповідь від уряду по оновленому плану зовнішньополітичних кроків. Дякую всім, хто з нами, з нашим народом, хто з Україною. Дякую всім, хто працює на незалежність нашої держави, на наші сильні позиції. Слава Україні!
Героям слава! And with that,
Героям слава!
oh my goodness, dude, you actually almost like came in on time right there. It was literally like a second off. Matthew, are you there? Are you there? Are you present in like the Discord?
I'm here in spirit, but I'm not sure if I'm really here. Am I really here? We may never know, but Enforcer Matt could do a legendary crash out right now. I'll tell you what, he could crash out on those Discord servers. I tell you what, oh, I'm telling you, it could be a crash out like nobody's ever seen before. I'm telling you what, but you gotta hold it together, gotta have patience, gotta have scruples, you gotta have it all.
I gotta be honest with you, I think you are fake news because you are coming through very clearly right now, and everyone's been going, where did the Discord servers go? Back in the day, there were Discord servers everywhere. Now there's none. Now the calls, they just drop off whenever they want to, and everyone goes, where's the Discord calls? And I gotta say, I just have no clue what to do, but in Varsimat, it sounded like you were kind of coming through a little bit right there, like really quickly, like almost no lag. Lagless, maybe, is what they say, the greatest lagless call that's ever been had. Like, it's lackluster, but talk again really quickly. I want to hear if you're doing well or not well.
We like to talk extra long. We like to talk with a lot of intent behind it. We like to say things that sound good on paper, but don't really match up to reality. We like to say things sometimes like that. It's called hyperbole. Hyperbole. Some people do it, some people don't. Old-fashioned term. People love to use it. It's a great thing.
I gotta be honest with you. I'm just gonna be absolutely upfront. I'm very tired today. Talking to that crazy bastard was very tiring, but one thing I also will say is that it sounds like, not just lying, it sounds like it kind of coming through a little clearly, and considering that people absolutely love Enforcer Matt, and I want to make sure that he gets his airtime, because airtime is very important. Everybody knows the ratings drop when we both don't get airtime, so we gotta make sure to have our airtime. We love airtime. Don't we love airtime, Enforcer Matt? We love airtime. Airtime.
I love airtime. I tell you what. Hopefully, I am coming through loud and clear though, because I'm still getting some lag on my end. I can hear it bleeping and blabbing like every 2 seconds, but hopefully, I'm coming through okay.
Yeah, you're coming through. Like, there's like maybe like a 3-second lag or a 4-second lag just about consistently at this point, but you actually are coming through clearly. So, folks, here's what we're going to do given that in mind. We are going to get into this question segment, and we're going to start addressing all of the super chats and live chats that we have tonight, but I also want to say that Enforcer Matt is going to be taking us through that for as long as he can, depending on how well Discord's holding together. If Discord's doing really badly, then I'll just take over and just start knocking out the questions solo. But as long as Matthew's call is coming through somewhat well, which it sounds like it is right now, we'll be trying to knock this out together. And so with that, Matthew, got us on into this question segment.
All right, so jumping right into our final question segment of the night, it's time to jump right back into our super chat questions. And once again, a huge shout out to everybody tonight for throwing in that support. We do sincerely appreciate it, and it really eats me up that the lag has been going on tonight, because I had a lot to say about the exact topics we were talking about, but sadly, the lag has cut it short a little bit. But thank you very much all for pushing through that trouble, because I tell you what, Discord, it causes discord quite often these days. I wish they would get that under control. But jumping into our first super chat here, this one goes to none other than LC39A. Throws in yet another support, and a huge thank you, good sir, for that support. He throws in a 130 Canadian, and we appreciate it all the way from Canada. He said, Matt is back. Hey, and thank you, Jesus.
Oh, Enforcer Matt is back. It sounds like he's back. There's a little bit of a lag there, like just a little bit, but the call is actually clear when he is talking. So that is a pretty good thing, I'd have to say. And I gotta say, LC39A, thank you for throwing in another massive support tonight, and also your 30th super chat to this channel, because the number 130 means that it's another $100 super chat, and it's the 30th one. So I gotta massively thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to have Enforcer Matt back on air. We wouldn't be able to be on air at all. We wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be yapping, and we wouldn't be talking about that big news that happened today in Anchorage. And there was a lot of different stuff that came out of that today, but I gotta be honest with y'all, folks. I'm just gonna be honest here. I'm gonna put out my 2 cents. As far as that could have gone, I think it went okay. I don't know, like, might be a little bit of a controversial opinion, but hear me out. We dissed on the Russian foreign press, like absolutely treated them like they were less than human for the large part. They got cots and they got some curtain partitions between them all. They slept the night here, like they arrived yesterday, slept the night in those kinds of conditions, and then they woke up and were treated to yesterday's tuna salad and some potato chips in a box. And then also, I think it was like some bread still in its plastic wrapping from the grocery store. So generally, I thought that was a pretty decent treatment of the Russian foreign press, considering that they're not anything to be respected. Then we brought Putin here, scared him a little with the flyover, which clearly did rattle him because he looked up at it, and if he wasn't scared by it, he wouldn't have looked up at it and then kind of like stumbled around for a second. The press got a couple of good jabs at him, to the point that he was startled and scared of the media to an extent. And then he rambled like an idiot like he normally does, and then he left. So generally, I think it went well, to be entirely honest.
Yeah, I would say personally, I think he got punked. Like, I know people were saying, "Oh, Putin came here and he ran us for fools or whatever." I don't think so, honestly. I think from the very start of it, with like the enforcer was saying, with the journalists being treated kind of crappily, to be honest, putting on cots and stuff like that, and the journalists were complaining like crazy. They didn't like being on the cots. They didn't like being in the stadium. They thought they were supposed to be in the Ritz-Carlton, and they didn't get that, so they were pissed off. Also, by the way, you got Putin showing up, and then they run these jets over his head. Honestly, I would would say single-handedly, I didn't even think of that myself. I'm like, if I was the one setting up this meeting and I was the one wanting to do it, I would have never thought, well, let's just have like a B-2 bomber fly over Putin's head and to show him a lesson. It's like, I would never thought of that. Honestly, that was pretty ingenious. I will give credit where credit is due. That was pretty smart. So to me, I think it was a good optic. And also, by the way, Putin did get the notorious yanking handshake. He got yanked and then, of course, yeeted in the handshake. So, messed him up a little bit with that. And then also the journalist thing, when he really got shocked by the journalist asking questions, you could tell he got rattled because Putin never makes facial expressions like that. So clearly he got rattled. So I would say overall, yes, it was not productive. Yes, it was probably a waste of, taxpayer money to do this, but it was done anyway. And the way it was done, I guess, is the best way it could have been done if you had to do it. So I guess it's decent.
Yeah, because I don't think, like, and here's the position I'm taking it from, folks. I generally, and you all know this because y'all have heard it over the prior days, generally think that bringing Putin to America is a bad idea. And I still think that it wasn't a good idea to bring him here. But as far as it could have gone with him being here, it brought a good smile onto my face to see how the Russian press was treated and also how Putin was treated, which generally he was treated like he was some kind of a little pipsqueak that we were trying to intimidate. And I found that to be pretty funny. So generally for that side of things alone, with how he treated them all, I think it actually didn't go that badly, all things considered. It could have been worse. I mean, we could have brought out the honor guard. We could have said that he's a distinguished guest, one of the greatest that ever visited the country. We could have come up with a bad peace deal. We could have done a whole bunch of other things that would have ended up worse than what happened today. Like looking at it and counting the blessings of what it turned into. This was actually probably one of the best ways it could have turned out. The fact that he even came here at all, although we wouldn't have liked that. He still came here, and as far as him coming here, I bet you that he regrets it. And I bet you a lot of members of the Russian foreign press really regret it because of how they had to spend the night waiting for the meeting the next day. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion.
And also, how do you like it? How do you like it as well? How do you like it as well that Putin tried to make up for all that embarrassing stuff by trying to go to the cemetery? He went to the cemetery where the Russian pilots were buried in Alaska and put flowers down at the cemetery. That was his way of making up for it. And honestly, I'm not even sure why we allowed Putin to even go do that because it gave him basically a propaganda opportunity, which we shouldn't have him have. We should have made sure that Putin just went straight to the meeting, straight back to the plane, and then left. But for some reason, and which this is the part I don't agree with, we let the Russian diplomats and representatives have free reign of Alaska, which we should not have been letting them do because this is not like a pleasure cruise or something. This is an enemy country showing up and negotiating to end a war which we want them to end. So Putin being able to run around and do these photo ops, I didn't think that was a good thing. And also, obviously, you had Medvedev the rat running to the fine restaurants in Anchorage and eating food there. That was not a good thing. And also, one of the goofies went up to that bear and nearly got mauled by the bear if it decided to attack. And of course, Russia would have blamed us probably for it if he got mauled. They would have said, "Oh, it's that American bear. They trained it to go attack the diplomat." Something stupid like that. So, rather than that, I think it was as good as it could have been under the circumstances.
Man, we gave them that classic Russian Jack Park treatment. And they got jacked. Like, they got jacked. There's actually a place in Anchorage, funnily enough, that is called the Russian Jack Park. What the hell is in here? That's a moose. A whole-ass moose just kind of, like, hiding in the weeds. But what else is in this park? Well, not much. It's just a creek and a moose waiting to beat your ass. Right there. Look at it. That thing is ready. That thing is ready to kill. But beyond that, interesting. Very interesting. They actually have a place called Russian Jack Park and a Costco in it right here. What does it look like in Russian Jack Park? Oh, this is actually close to Russia. They must have felt at home here. Look at this. Like the dirt roads, the crumbling trailers. Man, Alaska's actually in tough straits most of the time. But beyond that, this actually does look a lot like Russia, like no joke. So I guess they would feel a little bit at home at Russian Jack Park.
Yeah, I guess so, maybe. But honestly, though, I will say the whole thing. Also, by the way, I'm not sure if y'all saw it, but Putin, like when he decided to go get back on his plane, by the way, he got on that plane quick. Like he got on the plane like within 5 minutes or less. They had the stairs being pulled away. They had all the stuff being prepared for takeoff for the plane. They had to like run and get the hell out of Dodge once that meeting was over. They did not want to stick around whatsoever. And also the fact they canceled the lunch as well. That's pretty bad as well. Also, by the way, I see some people saying that we're trying to sugarcoat it. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. I'll be honest with you. I'm with the enforcer. I don't support war criminals coming to the United States. But if it was going to happen, and we didn't have a choice, because obviously we didn't have a choice, the U.S. president wanted to bring him here, so it was going to be a thing. So under the circumstances, in my opinion, that was the best way it could have gone. It ended with basically everybody realizing that Putin was making more demands. He was not negotiating whatsoever. He was simply making one-sided demands. So we basically sent him on his way. It's really kind of ambiguous at this point where this is going to go, and it really got nowhere at all. So I would say that's the best result we could have hoped for.
Yeah, I would have to say it's as far as it was going to go, it didn't go badly. And I think that's what a lot of people aren't getting. This isn't sugarcoating it. We're not the president of the United States, so saying he shouldn't come here is just an opinion. If he is going to come here, which he was, because the president made that decision, and there's nothing we can really do about that because he's the president. If he was going to come here, how could it have gone when he came here? And out of all of the outcomes, I actually personally didn't expect we were going to try and intimidate him off the bat, which was something that I was pleasantly surprised by. And I thought, oh, out of all the ways that this could have gone with him coming here, this is actually the best case scenario of how I thought it could have gone. It was better than I actually thought it could have gone, because we spent all of our time disrespecting the Russian press and also disrespecting Putin himself. So, you know, as far as it could have gone, since he was coming here and there was nothing that was going to be changed about that, it wasn't that bad. Not trying to sugarcoat it, but since it was going to happen and this was the outcome, not bad. But anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on into the next question. But a huge thanks to you so much once again, LC39A, for that insanely massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, Matthew, what do we got for the next one?
All right, so our next one goes to another channel legend. It is Jesus UCSB, who's been around for a very long time. It's good to see you once again, Jesus, and thank you very much for stopping by and throwing in that $50 support and helping the channel to keep on running on this very troublesome night of developments in Alaska and also Discord mayhem, I guess you could say. But Jesus said, no deal, not an inch, LSA, and Mexicans for Ukraine.
And I got to thank you so much for the support, Jesus UCSB, being in the Lee Spring Army tanker of Vilseck, Germany, where the 2nd Cav Regiment is. And the 2nd Cav Regiment is really, really cool. But beyond that, I also have to say, a huge thanks to you for the support, and I'm happy to hear that no deal of any kind was even reached at all inside of Anchorage, and it appears that even the Russians, even the United States president, with all the efforts that he's been trying to take to force a ceasefire in Ukraine, still is not able to reach the Russians with a peace, which shows y'all how unamenable they are. I mean, the president's going above and beyond at this point to just try and find any way to make a peace, even if it's going to be putting the West as a disadvantage. And still he can't get one. That really shows what the Russians are all about at this point. But beyond that, I do have to thank you massively for support once again. And also, by the way, folks, since it just crossed my mind, I was supposed to say this right after the speech from Zelensky, but I do want everyone in the LSA to give a big, hearty happy birthday to an old guard and channel legend of the Lee Spring Army, Old Warrior. It is Old Warrior's birthday today, and I want to make sure to point that out because Old Warrior has been with this channel for an incredibly long time. And, of course, we always like to celebrate the birthdays of folks who have been in the LSA for a really, really long time. So a big happy birthday to Old Warrior from myself and Enforcer Matt, and a big happy birthday on the behalf of the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, a huge thanks to you once again.
Indeed, a huge happy birthday to Old Warrior, by the way.
Oh my God, bro! You had to you had to whip out the soundboard. Oh my God!
Oh my God!
Bro, I told Matthew we were only going to use that thing once tonight because I said we don't want to use that a lot. That's going to get really cheese. But he finally used it the one time because if it wasn't for the Discord lag issues, we actually were planning on doing like a deadpan joke and then playing the ba-dum thing from like the drum set behind the joke. But because of the lag issues tonight, we weren't able to do that at all. But you know, it's a good thing to know that soundboard was finally used the one time it was supposed to be used. But a big thanks to you so much once again for support, Jesus UCSB. I hope that does dress that well. And once again, huge happy birthday to Old Warrior. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one. And also, by the way, I see people commenting on the whole thing between Putin and the whole meeting there in Alaska and all that stuff. I'll be honest with y'all. I'll be honest. I get the fact that people do not want Putin here, because I'm 100% with you with that. I did not want Putin to show up here on U.S. soil because I knew it wasn't going to be productive. And also, by the way, we shouldn't be sending the message that war criminals are allowed to visit the United States to get the red carpet treatment. But y'all got to admit, y'all have to admit on some level, and I'm not just saying this to sugarcoat it, I'm not saying this to excuse it or whatever. If there was any other way to handle it, bringing him over here, I don't think there was a better way to handle it than the way it was done. Because now, I will say the aftermath's to be determined, because right now we're really not sure exactly how the U.S. is going to deal with Putin's refusal, basically. Right now, I think Zelensky's saying that he hasn't even been contacted by the U.S. officials yet. So we don't know exactly what's going to go on with that, but I really believe that probably no meeting is going to take place beyond this one. I don't think so. I don't think Zelensky's going to be meeting with Putin because nothing's really changed, so why would he actually meet with Putin? That wouldn't make any sense. And I don't think the U.S. really has a reason to have another meeting with Putin until that happens. So basically, the real outcome is this is pretty much a dead-end street for the talks. So I'm not really sure what else we could have hoped for, really, because I'm not in favor of giving Russia a free pass when they plan on starting World War III. We shouldn't be giving them a free sanctions. We shouldn't be giving them a break whatsoever. We should keep the pressure on them and make sure that Putin comes crumbling down as a government. So I don't know. I think it was personally a good result. But Enforcer, what do you think overall?
I'd have to say I generally would agree with Enforcer Matt on that. As far as it could have gone, this is about the best result that we could have got. I think a lot of people are kind of getting hung up on the idea of it happening at all, which generally I do have to agree with Matthew. I'm not a big fan of a war criminal, not only that, an enemy of the Republic, stepping foot on American soil, but at the same time, if the president was going to make that kind of decision, which he did, this is the best way that it could have gone. So I would have to be on that fence, or not really on that fence, but more so on that hill than another, because it's one thing to say it's not a good idea to bring him here, and I definitely agree with that, and I'm still not really happy that he came here. But as far as bringing him here and then spending a good bit of the time that he arrived intimidating him, and then also the press absolutely hammering him, and then we also treated everyone with Russia Today, Zvezda News, so on and so forth, like absolute garbage. I mean, that wasn't really that bad of an outcome, really. I mean, like all of the Russians left, I promise you this, unhappy. Like the people in the press, they're pissed off with the United States now, guaranteed. Perfectly happy with that. I think that that's what they had coming to him. Putin left, most likely incredibly unhappy and still bitching about Nizhny Novgorod in 900 AD. So, once again, really happy about that. That couldn't have gone any better. As far as him coming here, out of all the outcomes that we could have gotten, I mean, it could have been worse. Like just to say it this way, it could have been a lot worse. He could have come here, and then the president could have said, "Okay, Ukraine's going to have to give up everything east of the Dnipro River, and if they don't, we're going to start sanctioning Ukraine." That could have been an outcome, and that was not the outcome. No deal was reached, and we also disrespected everyone from Russia that arrived. So, as far as it could have gone with him coming here, that was probably the best outcome we could have expected, really.
Yeah, I would agree 100%.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And so with that, it is time for us to move on into the next question.
All right, so moving into our next Super Chat question here. This one goes to another channel legend. This time it is BC Skyman, a channel legend indeed, and he puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, BC, for that support once again, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And BC said, "Good evening, Enforcers. I'm all for peace, but will never agree with red carpet treatment of a war criminal on U.S. soil." And I agree with that 100%, BC. He said, "I would only agree to a meeting with a ceasefire first, and Ukraine must be present, and innocent people are still dying daily." And you're right, BC. Not only are they dying daily, but literally right in the middle of the peace talks, and I'll put peace talks in air quotes like always, Putin was attacking civilians in Ukraine. Like while those talks were going on, he was ordering attacks on civilians at the exact same time he was saying that he wanted to bring the war to an end. So complete lies out of Putin like usual. There's nothing new there. He's always lying. But I will say this, though. They should have agreed to a ceasefire first. That was a logical thing to do before bringing a war criminal to your soil, as he should have showed good faith by initiating a 30-day ceasefire, and that should have been the prerequisite for actually having real peace talks. But like I've said for a long time, this was not really about negotiations, because the U.S. even admitted that before they went into it. So, I guess it was a photo op. I'm saying that as non-politically as I can. It was just a photo op. And it turned out they got the photo, but everybody left extremely disappointed and also very, very exhausted after hearing Putin's BS for like 6 hours straight. But Enforcer, what say you?
You see, Enforcer Matt, are you a reporter or a comedian? Are you some kind of a clown? Anyways, as I was saying, in 900 AD, Prince Yaroslav of Nizhny Novgorod, where was I? Oh yes, the map from 1600, made by a Russian
That guy's a
surveyor.
professional yapper. I've never seen by yap like that guy, by the way.
Me either, man. Like, it's like, how the hell, bro? Then he'll sit there, he'll just, like, bounce around even. He doesn't even, like, do it in a sequence. Like, he literally does it the way I did it. He'd be like, anyways, sorry, not Yaroslav from 980. Ivan the Great from 1600. Yes, Ivan the Great. You see, he commissioned a map. This map, honestly, dude, you know what he speaks like? He speaks like one of those crazy conspiracy theorists, really.
I think it's a strategy, personally. You know how for example, he's former KGB, by the way. He was a paper pusher in the KGB, but he's still KGB trained. Typically, in interrogations, what they'll try to do is wear you down like this. That way, you become more pliable. I think that's what Putin is trying to do when he starts yapping in pointless facts like that. He's trying to wear the other side down, where they get so exhausted they're more pliable to basically accept what he's trying to convince them of. I think that's what his real plan is when he does that. But all it does to the public is it bores the hell out of people and also pisses people off because nobody wants to hear just random yapping.
Listen, Matthew, are you some kind of a joke? Are you a clown? Or some kind of a real man? But beyond that, what was I saying? Oh, yes, the Polish hussars, yes, of the 17th century. Very important part of history. But as I was saying, the Russo-Polish War was an incredibly important one between the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and also the Russian state that existed at the time. As Queen Jadwiga of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, yes, she conducted this amazing thing of this cavalry charge that occurred near to the area of the city of Vilnius, inside of Lithuania. Very important thing. But outside of that, enough about that. Not very important. But the Battle of Sevastopol in 1853, that the British and the French conducted against the Russians. A very great disgrace, no?
That's good yapping right there.
Bro, dude, honestly, man, I could probably best Putin at it, man. Like, I could just sit there and be like, enough about Russian history. Let's talk about America. Let's talk about the Jamestown colony of 1606. And, like, just start doing that. Like, and then sit there and say, look, are you a statesman? Or are you some kind of a fool? You know, and then sit there and just keep going. Dude, I'd probably get poisoned, man, if I kept it up for long enough. But still, I would have to say, in my personal opinion, BC Skyman, I would definitely agree with you that Putin should have never been brought to American soil or ever gotten the red carpet treatment. He is an enemy of the Republic. His nation is an open enemy of the United States of America. And for that reason, I do not think that he should ever be allowed in the United States. As far as it went, though, with him being here, I think it was the best outcome, although I didn't like the idea of him being here. You know, like, being objective, didn't want him here, still don't like the idea that he was ever here, but as far as it could have gone while he was here, it was probably the best outcome that we could have gotten. But outside of that, I also would say that Ukraine must be present at a ceasefire negotiation, and any other niceties that are provided or furnished to the Russians should be after the Russians agree to a ceasefire and that ceasefire holds. I think that that's what we should be working on as a common ground as well, BC Skyman. I would completely agree with you on that. So a massive thanks to you so much once again, and also thank you for being an old guard and a channel legend. And I hope that does address that incredibly well, and also clear up some of the more details, the little details that we have about the more particulars of this whole thing. But listen, are you all some sorts of fools, or are you followers of the Enforcer? Anyways, as I was saying, in 1606 in the Jamestown colony, there was this man, Governor Ratcliffe, they called him, of the Virginia colony. The Virginia colony was actually named by the legitimate, named after the Virgin Queen Mary, as she was claimed to be a virgin, and she gave the charter for the Virginia Company, so it became called Virginia. But as I was saying, enough of that. Anyways, we need to talk about the importance of the colony of Georgia. Yes, it's a debtors colony created in 1734. A very important colony, as Britain would send their debtors to the country. And I have to say that that is a very important thing to remember, is that debtors are people who do not pay their bills. And speaking of people who do not pay their bills, there is an endemic issue amongst people in the state of Georgia these days who no longer pay their bills, and they end up having their bills pile up, and they end up having a tremendous thing. But speaking of pile-ups, there was a terrific car pile-up. Henry Ford, the inventor of the automobile, created the car. Well, not the car. That was actually Daimler-Benz, who created the automobile. But beyond that, we have to remember that the automobile is an incredibly important thing and a facet of modern society.
Man, you're going to run our audience off, man.
But basically, as a roundabout, what I'm trying to say is that Russia should not exist. But anyways, with that, man, we like honestly, some people were having a laugh from that, but that's what he does. That's what he legitimately does. Folks, if I ever get lined up to have an interview with him, even if it means I might lose my head, I will absolutely do circles around the guy and sit there, and every time he interrupts me, be like, listen, are you a statesman? Or are you some kind of a fool here? Do you not understand what I'm talking about? Anyways, and then just keep going. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to WS, and thank you very much, WS, as well, for that $50 support, by the way. Very generous of you, and we do appreciate that. He said, don't worry about the tech issues. Just happy you're live and you get the news. And also, thank you for being very patient with us, by the way. I'm literally, like, when I say it, like, this has me, like, livid. Like, I could start cussing very foully like a sailor right now. But I'm holding it back, folks, because guess what? I'm PG. I'm a family man. But what WS said, also, what happened with that nuclear-powered missile that Russia was going to test today and about out 20 minutes back? So, apologies if you covered. And, woof, what a day.
I gotta agree, WS. I would have to be with Matthew on that part. I am absolutely holding together from a historic crash out because of Discord problems. Tech problems are the worst as far as I'm concerned on the operational side of running a show. Any other problem can be dealt with. Tech problems are pretty much an absolute deal breaker. It's never you're never able to deal with them once you go live. So it's been incredibly aggravating for both of us, and probably all of y'all. But I do thank you so much for the support, and saying that you're just happy for us to be live. We're happy to be live as well, even with the issues. But beyond that, I do have to say that, weirdly enough, they didn't test it today. They have been stating all week they were going to test it today. I actually, to be honest with you, I think it's because the test may have run into some issues, and so the firing of the missile was delayed. That is probably the most likely case, because this is not the first time that a Russian test launch of a weapon has been postponed due to technical difficulties with launching the actual system. We've seen this endless amounts of times. So I would have to say that that's probably the reason why that has not been, the missile has not been tested today, is most likely technical difficulties or technical issues instead of anything pertaining to trying to look more peaceful, at least in my opinion. But a big thanks to you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on from that one right there and moving on to our next one here. This one is going to go to AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, another channel legend, and thank you very much, Mr. Bang Bang, for that $30 support. We do appreciate it very much. I feel like that's what Zelensky says sometimes. He says, bang, bang, beach, get out of the way. But anyways, thank you very much, good sir, for that support once again. He said, is the Russian misinterpretation of the 9 February 1990 conversation between Mikhail Gorbachev and the U.S. Secretary of State James Baker going to come to the surface? And it's not our fault Russia misinterpreted that conversation.
I don't think it did. From what we heard, apparently Putin was literally stuck on the whole, listen, are you a president or some kind of a fool? Anyways, as I was saying, about the history side of things, that he didn't even get to the misunderstanding that happened in 1990 that may have had some sort of relevance to the situation we're dealing with right now. Apparently that didn't come up, at least from what we've heard in any specific detail. So as far as I would know, the answer to that's no. That did not come up, at least from what we know publicly. But outside of that, it does appear quite clear that regardless of whether that's what happened or not, they sure as hell rambled about history for hours. And I gotta be honest with y'all, folks, the president isn't really one to sit around and listen that long. Like, that's not a political thing, that's just true. He's not really one to sit around that long. So that's why he looked like he was absolutely exhausted and spent in anything that happened afterwards, is because that was the too long didn't read meeting for the president. All this just didn't matter to him at all. And on top of that, it didn't matter to anyone. Like, even if I was there, I would have been getting worn down, because who the hell cares what happened in 900 AD? We're talking about the laws and treaties that are in effect today. Like the whole argument that Putin has, folks, by the way, at this point, that he said to Tucker and the president about justifying the invasion of Ukraine, is that the state of Ukraine doesn't even exist. That's his argument, and he goes all the way back to the year 900 AD to try and make this claim, and then works up from 900 AD to 1600 to try and make the claim. So he covers about 700 years of history, none of it having to do with what exists in the modern day. To say that the state of Ukraine does not exist, it makes no sense, because it's like, who gives a shit? Like, honestly, like, really, who cares? It does not matter. What we know is that the Soviet Union gave the state of Ukraine the borders that it has today, that was recognized as an independent Soviet republic in the Soviet Union, and when they seceded from the Soviet Union in 1991, they maintained those borders. That's all we need to know. Like, that's literally all that matters right now as far as international law and border sovereignty is concerned, is what happened when Ukraine seceded from the Soviet Union in 1991. Because to make this claim even more clear, there are so many countries out there that have claims to all the land surrounding them off of historical claims, or the idea that a state is an artificial construct. Because y'all know something that is absolutely crazy about the argument that Putin makes. He says that Ukraine is an artificial construct, but every country is an artificial construct. Russia is an artificial construct. The entire premise of a government is an artificial construct. There's nothing in the world that says that Poland has to have the borders it has right now. That isn't founded in nature. That isn't founded in any sort of natural science. That is an artificial, man-made creation, is the borders Poland has today. Same with Germany, same with America, same with Russia, China, Iran, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and South Korea, Japan, so on and so forth. Every single country is a creation of an artificial construct of man, which is the idea of governance, administration, and sovereignty of a fictitious entity that we give existence and power just through our belief in it, which is the idea of a nation state. So saying that Ukraine should not exist because it's an artificial construct is quite truly a ridiculous argument, because that means that no country on the planet has a right to exist, because they're all artificial constructs. They make no, like when you think about it, it makes no sense, the idea of a nation at all. Like, why in the world is there some sort of, why in the world is it that this particular government in Poland gets to have a particular say in the laws and matters that pertain to people living within this defined area that has no reason to be defined in that specific way, rather than it is? Like, that, like, none of that really makes sense when you start to break it down into its most abstract form. But that's what we do in this world. There are, like, for example, the United States of America's government, the federal government, and then the state governments have specific jurisdiction for the federal government across the entirety of the country pertaining to specific matters that arise under its particular subject matter jurisdiction, and then the states have the control of everything that remains within their borders. Why does Alabama have its borders? Because we artificially gave them the borders that Alabama has. Same with California and every other state. Why in the world does the United States federal government have subject matter jurisdiction over the rest of the United States, including its overseas territories and the in Alaska and Hawaii, out of the lower 48 and the lower 48? Because we artificially gave it that ability. Government is an abstract concept. So saying that Ukraine is an abstract concept and it doesn't have a right to exist because of that makes no sense. Like, it has no sense at all to it, because that's the case for every country. But I do thank you so much for the support, AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang, and I hope that does address that well. But really, any argument that the Russians bring up nowadays, it just doesn't have any merit at all, because the basic argument turns back to the state of Ukraine has recognized borders that have existed since the secession from the Soviet Union in 1991. And those are the borders that should be legally enforced. Much like Russia's borders since 1991 are to be legally enforced, because those are their borders. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, we do have a little bit of breaking news coming out right this second. Some aftermath of the summit in Alaska right now. We are getting word that apparently the United States president hand-delivered to Putin the letter from the First Lady concerning the fate of the Ukrainian children kidnapped by Russia. It was personally handed to Putin before he left, and Putin left with that in his hands. And apparently Putin didn't get to read it before he left, but when he got back on his plane, he must have had the chance to read it. So that was apparently handed to him, so I'm sure that will not do any favors for future talks. Also, by the way, we are also hearing from the U.S. president, apparently in an interview, that he may impose tariffs on Russian oil, but give it 2 more weeks. He also hints that maybe China might get tariffed for buying Russian oil as well, and he might also impose tariffs on other Russian oil buyers within 3 more weeks. So there's no telling. It might actually happen, maybe not, but we've heard that phrase before. But we'll have to wait and see. Time will tell. But right now we're hearing that apparently the aftermath is not positive. The overall theme of all these developments here are negative for Russia. So it's not like all peachy and like rosy and stuff like that. It sounds like, once again, like we predicted, this did not go the way they planned it. So, you know, that's what it is.
Also, I got to say, a big amount of respect to the First Lady for apparently personally handwriting or having a letter commissioned on her behalf to ask about the fate of the Ukrainian children that had been kidnapped by the Russians. That's pretty direct, honestly, to just ask what's happened to the kids. You know, that's not the kind of thing that's normally diplomatic to say, what the hell have you done with all these kids? Are they even alive anymore? So I got to say that's a decent thing. That's nice that the letter was given off. But beyond
also by the way, apparently I was lagging or something, or people want me to repeat it. The letter that the First Lady gave to her husband, which is the president, to then give to Putin was literally a letter basically demanding to know what happened to the Ukrainian children, where they've gone, and when they're going to be returned to Ukraine. And you might recall, that is the exact thing that the Alaskan citizens were on the streets. They were all in the streets protesting Putin coming to Alaska and Anchorage, and they were holding signs saying, "Where are the children, Putin, you war criminal?" That's the signs they were holding up. And that's the big thing Ukraine's been asking. Where the hell have our children been taken that have been abducted and stolen from mothers and fathers in Ukraine? Because nobody really truly knows. Nobody really knows the answer to that question. So that is quite a good thing that the First Lady actually did that. And also it's a good thing that the president actually felt the need to actually deliver that to Putin as well. That's a good sign.
Also, Matthew, are you lagging anymore?
Oh, I don't know. Am I?
No, you're not anymore. It's coming through just fine now.
Oh, maybe Discord got their act together, but I'm glad to hear that, though.
Yeah, listen, look at that, man. You're literally coming through instantly. Like, I bet you that you're hearing that I probably have, like, absolutely no lag after you get done talking either.
Oh, well, yeah, it's actually coming through loud and clear. Thank God for that.
Oh my God, it really was a Discord issue, folks. Hey, it's neither one of our computers. It really was a Discord issue. It's done. It's over. The lag is done. We're through. But it's kind of crazy though, man. That it literally like the lag ended right after the news segment's over. It's only been over for like 15 minutes, and then the lag ends. Like that like it would have been better for the lag to honestly start now because it would have made it a lot easier to get through the news. But anyways. With that, folks, the lag is over. Yay! But anyways, with that, I do have to say, that's a good thing to hear the letter was handed off. And I see, like, I just gotta say, folks, like, there's some people will never be happy with anything because, like, you know, like, the letter, you know, couldn't have just been written and it may have not been handed off. That's an alternative. And, you know, if it wasn't handled off, why are they not caring about the children? And then they make a letter about the children, and people say, why do they even care about the kids? Like, they're, like, folks, I just gotta be honest with y'all. Like, I know that a lot of people are into the whole, like, political Kool-Aid thing of being, like, really hard left or hard right and acting like anything anyone does on either side is good or bad. On this channel, we don't get political. If something's good, it's good. I mean, they could have shown no care for the kids at all, and they could have not given a letter at all to Putin asking about the safety of these children. To even show that they cared. That's an alternative. They did. I mean, that's a pretty good move. You know, they could have just done nothing, and then we would be saying, why didn't they do anything at all? So, you know, you got to take things for what they are and look at them with kind of like a blank slate and just go, well, on the face of it, that one action alone is not a bad one. That's actually pretty decent, you know.
And also, the First Lady doesn't have to write any letters at all. Like, honestly, I'm kind of surprised she did that, actually, because she could simply just sit back and just, you know, be an observer. She doesn't have to do anything. She has no official duties or role, like, in the government, per se. But she took the initiative to actually do that, which, honestly, it could, like, possibly derail the whole situation with Putin, which, honestly, I'd be perfectly fine with that. If asking about where the children went derails the talks, well, that tells us exactly what we need to know, because if he doesn't, you know, want to answer that question, then obviously he's a devil, like a much worse devil than people even thought in the first place. And obviously abducting children is horrific. So, and also, by the way, I think she's from Slovenia. I think she is. So she's not too far away from where she grew up. This whole situation here with Ukraine and in Europe. So it's not too far away from the whole problem.
Yeah, you know, like, you know, just being fair, folks, because, you know, like I don't know why people think this, folks, here on the channel, but when we say things that are in criticism of a president, it doesn't mean that we now lean like when we make criticisms of Trump, we don't lean far left, and when we make criticisms of Biden, we're not leaning far right. We make criticisms that are fair. I mean, it's not based in any kind of a political sentiment. It's based off of an analytical sort of a sentiment. And so if a letter like that's issued, there's the choice that they could have made to not write that letter. I mean, that's a very decent thing to do. And it does actually show that there's some due diligence or care being made from just a neutral perspective to wonder about the fate of those children. The president could have also decided on his own unilaterally to not hand off that letter to Putin, and yet the decision was made to hand off the letter. So I mean, in general, that was a decent move all around, just looking at it for that one thing, completely forgetting the rest of it all attached, who the president is, who the first lady is, what the government is like, what the United States is like, what the Russians are like. Just looking at that one action alone, in all fairness, it was a pretty decent one. I have to say, it's great to show that at least the first lady is showing some sort of care or concern for the safety of the children that have been kidnapped from Ukraine, which is about 20,000 of them that are missing in Russia. And we are being told that there are some very concerning things that are happening to them at this point, as reports are starting to come out that some of these children are ending up being sold in literal catalogs. And for what purposes? Any. So, y'all can fill in the blanks on that, what will most likely end up happening to these children. And that is an absolutely horrendous and grave thing to think about. But anyways, with that.
And also another thing that people might have forgotten about, I'm not really sure about the personal feelings that the first lady has toward Putin, but the Putin and the Russian government has done some things which would be considered very nasty toward the first lady. They actually aired some very lewd pictures on Russian state television a while back. I think from a long time ago, some pictures were out there or something, and they aired it on Russian television, which obviously was not a good thing, and it was meant to humiliate and embarrass the family of the president. So obviously that was probably not a good thing. Obviously not a good thing. So she probably has a bone to pick with Putin as well. So that probably plays a role.
Yeah, I would have to agree, certainly with that. I also see some people saying, let's see, some people are like, oh my God, that's happening in Russia. Yeah, apparently, from what I've been hearing, we don't talk about the situation a lot on the humanitarian side with the attacks the Russians are conducting on Ukrainian civilians still, or what's happening to the Ukrainian children. But there are Ukrainian children that have been gathered up by some Russians. And just to say this really quickly before people go into it's like a global conspiracy or a ring to do these things to children. There are people like this everywhere, just like there are just completely detached drug dealers in every single country dealing in illicit goods. It's the same sort of a thing with this. It's an evil crime that these people are committing. Doesn't mean it's a part of some sort of a great global conspiracy. These are just sick people like they are around the world. But beyond that, these kids are actually being bought and sold inside of Russia. Some of them are, not all of them, but some of them, from what we know at least, several hundred of them, are being bought and sold in literal magazines where you can pretty much order them like a mail order bride, which is a very sick thing. From what we know, it's happening more so off in the Siberian regions, at least from what we would know. But then again, anyone can order them in Russia, and anyone could order them outside of Russia, and they would end up being shipped to them. So we don't know, and of course, you can run your mind wild. These children are practically being sold into slavery at this point, so anything can happen to them. So your mind could run wild with the possibilities of what could happen to these kids. Any sort of a horrendous thing could happen to them. And that's a incredibly atrocious thing to think about, that's not only happening in Russia, but the Russian government is pretty much turning a completely blind eye to whatever is happening to these children and not looking out for their well-being, safety, or care, considering that they were quite truly kidnapped by the Russian army and the government from their families and households and brought into a foreign land, and now anything's happening to them, and the Russians have no due diligence to even care for these children, which is a sick and absolutely terrible sort of a thing. So I want to put that out there to folks to understand the kind of situation involved there, and also to once again say the first lady could have decided to not write a letter, and the president could have decided to not hand off that letter even if it was written. The decision was made to write the letter, and then the decision was made by the president to hand that letter off. Out of those two actions alone, I'd say that that's a pretty decent thing to show that there is some concern for those children, which right now nobody in the world except for the Ukrainians appears to have a lot of concern over, which is an incredibly unfortunate thing. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Wubba, who puts in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, Wubba, as well for that support and also helping to get the channel running. And Wubba said, I hope you guys didn't run out of coffee while I was on vacation. And we didn't. We actually went to the store, a rare visit to the store, the very long delayed visit to the store, actually, and got about 4 of those little, like, I don't know what if it's like a quart of coffee or something, like the cold brew that you get out of the fridge at the store. That's what we're usually drinking these days. I think it's called stock. Or something like that, or Stoke, I think, or something like that. But it's really good. It's pretty tasty. It's got a good amount of caffeine in it, so it keeps us buzzing very much. But thank you very much, Wubba, for the coffee fund. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say a massive thanks to you for the support, Wubba. And fortunately, we didn't run out of coffee. And I got to thank you massively for support for restocking our coffee fund, so that way we can get some more coffee when we need it. Because we're already starting to consume the coffee fast. Matthew gets a special type. I get, like, I just bulk buy the same type and just drink it every single night. But it keeps us absolutely zooming on air, thankfully. Because nowadays, whenever I'm off air, I feel very tired. And I think it's because I've gotten so used to the caffeine that my normal state is now just feeling kind of tired for the most part. But beyond that, I do thank you massively once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I'm going to run a poll here in a second. I want to know this question or this answer from the audience. Do y'all think there's going to be a follow-up meeting between the U.S. and Russia? Because ultimately, that's all that matters. All the other sideshow business, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the politicians are saying. If they're saying, oh, you know, it's up to Zelensky, that doesn't matter because we know Zelensky's not going to agree to go land, so that's a dead end. But I'm going to run the poll. Do y'all think that there will be a second U.S.-Russia meeting? Because me personally, I don't think there will be. If you notice, at the very end of the press conference when they wrapped up the Alaska meeting, Putin said, the next meeting, I want to be in Moscow. He said that directly to the U.S. president, and the U.S. president responded with, oh, I might get some heat for that. That could happen. Maybe. He didn't accept it. He basically rejected it in the wide open. That was a rejection, a very polite rejection, but a rejection nonetheless, indicating that he was irritated. So I think probably not, but I'm going to run that poll here in just a second. But with that, we're moving on to our next super chat, which goes to Trism666, who puts in a $25 donation, and thank you very much, Trism, as well for that support. They said, what facts you got, or what facts you got about Fort Vancouver and LSA?
Listen, Tristan, are you some sort of a joke, or are you actually taking this seriously? Anyways, Fort Vancouver. We have to talk about the Fort of Vancouver. Let's take a look at where it is. This is actually near to Portland, Oregon, and near to the area of Vancouver, Washington, an incredibly important place. If you all know, back in the day, this actually was a jointly combined Oregon territory. It's a part of, actually, this was the part of the British Columbia territory, this whole area was. And there was actually this very interesting thing called the Pig War that almost happened in this area. A very interesting thing where a British duke who is in charge of the governance of this area actually had a small pig, and this pig was a prized pet, but an American farmer shot the pig because it was continuing to forage its crops. But beyond that, the British almost got into the shooting match with the Americans in this area and almost turned into an entire war. But enough of that, that's not important. What we need to talk about is the modern industrial importance of Portland and Vancouver, which still are somewhat significant and important, at least in our modern day. And this is all to say that we have to take Portland, Oregon, and make it a safe city again. But outside of that, we do have to say that at least as far as Vancouver, Washington is concerned, there is an Amtrak station here, serviced by the Cascades Amtrak and also the Coast Starlight, which come through nearly daily or several times a day. Nevertheless, there are a large amount of industries in this area as well that contribute to the local economy. And in my personal experience, I have to tell you that Fort Vancouver is not only an interesting place, which you can see right here, but it is also a very nice spot in general, Vancouver, Washington. Very much different than downtown Portland, Oregon, as many people would know who have ever traveled through the area. Are you traveled? Are you some kind of a joke, Tourism 666? Or are you a serious man? Because any serious man is a traveled man that would know a great deal about all kinds of history and ramblings and rants. And we all know that Vancouver, Washington is infinitely better than Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon, it's just very rough. It's, you know, you go downtown, you might not come back around. You know what they say about Portland, Oregon. Very scary place. But beyond that, I do have to say that Vancouver, Washington, and Fort Vancouver, very interesting place. So, unfortunately, though, to be entirely honest with you, Trism 666, I actually do not know a lot, particularly about Fort Vancouver. Rather than I think it was close to the end of the Oregon Trail, because the Oregon Trail actually ended somewhere around the Willamette River, I believe, which is here. Yeah, so I think the end of the Oregon Trail is somewhere around here. Let me check this really quickly. Let me type in the end of the Oregon Trail. End of the Oregon Trail. Oh, it's right here. Yeah, it actually is right near to the interstate. What do you know? But this was technically the end of the Oregon Trail. And they actually have a cool little museum here that talks about the Oregon Trail and the settlements heading out further west and so on. Really neat stuff, actually. But beyond that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and a massive thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. We wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. But I actually do not know a great deal about Fort Vancouver in particular, rather than it most likely was part of the end of the Oregon Trail and the beginning of the growth of the city of Portland and Vancouver, Washington combined. So a big thanks to you so much once again. And also it's the Willamette River. Sorry, everyone. I think I call it the Willamette River. It's the Willamette River. I was actually told that very recently by someone, because I was calling it the Willamette River because it's spelled a lot like William, but apparently it's Willamette. It's not Willamette. I thought it was Willamette, but it's Willamette apparently. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so let's see what y'all said on the poll question currently running. Will there be a second U.S.-Russia meeting? It looks like 62%, the most popular option, said no. 38% said yes, there will be a second meeting. And I am solidly in the no camp. I do not think there will be a second meeting. The U.S. is currently saying that they're trying to set up a Zelensky-Putin meeting. And I'm just going to ask y'all a simple question. Do you really think that Zelensky and Putin are going to meet together after everything that was said at today's meeting? I would say probably not. The odds of that happening are very slim to none. Zelensky hasn't even gotten the update yet from the U.S. president. He's still waiting on the update according to our last information, so we don't even have his reaction yet. Zelensky's reaction to whatever was discussed could be so bad, along with the European reaction, that this entire situation changes completely. It could be that bad of a reaction coming out of Kyiv. So we don't know yet how that reaction is going to be, but I have a feeling it's not going to be good. So I'm solidly with the no camp. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm solidly with the no camp as well. I think this was the end of it all. If you meet directly with Putin and there's absolutely no forward progress to be made with a direct head-to-head meeting, there's no progress to be made at all in any way. So what's the point of a second meeting? There is not one. So that would be my answer to it. And I'd also be in the hardcore 61% that says no. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jenna Last Name Tolls, and literally changed their name to Jenna Last Name Tolls, which I appreciate that, and I like that a lot. They put in a $20 donation. Thank you very much, Jenna, for that support. They said, the art of no deal in Slava Ukraine. Now, I will say this. We stay apolitical. We don't get political. We don't say, oh, this person is definitely goofy or this person is goofy. We simply analyze the actions, the individual actions that are being made by the United States and other countries. But I will say solely on this one right here, at this point, it is what it is. Now, if we had come out of this meeting today and they said, oh, we're going to give away Alaska's natural resources to Russia to come to a peace deal, I'd be like, are you out of your mind? Are you crazy for doing that? But luckily, we didn't get anything crazy like that today. It was merely, I guess the worst thing that came out of it, honestly, was the expenditure of taxpayer dollars to make this meeting happen, which was probably a good bit because we had to fly in the B-2s and things like that, which cost money. But ultimately, though, if we're talking about spending money and kind of like just burning money for the hell of it, it was not a bad burn of money, in my opinion, to fly the B-2 over Putin's head. I think it was honestly pretty cool to see. And I'm a taxpayer. I don't mind a few tax dollars being spent on that to show Putin what kind of force he might be going up against in the future. So me personally, I didn't have a problem with it. But Enforcer, what say you?
Me personally, I didn't really have that much of a problem with it either. I thought it was as far as things went, intimidating the president of the Russian Federation with a B-2 flyover, considering he's never seen a B-2. I thought that was a pretty good one. A lot of people don't know that, actually. A lot of people don't know that. Putin has never seen in person a lot of American military equipment. He sees pictures of it, and he hears about it in briefings, but he's never seen it. So that was literally the first time he's ever seen F-22s, F-35s, and B-2 Spirits in person, and seen them fly overhead. I mean, and you got to think about it as well. Like, this isn't Joe Blow here in America who's going to an air show. That B-2 could kill him one day. Like, that thing could drop a mop on a bunker he's hiding in and kill him one day. That's the message that's generally being sent by that, because he's not just us. He's the leader of the Russian Federation. That bomber right there is a flying killing machine of a country that he's not a part of that could be ordered one day to kill him. And it flew right over his head. Now, that's the message that was being sent. Like, a lot of people may not interpret it that way because many people may not try and understand the position that he is in. But that was the message being sent, is that any one of those aircraft could end up being the one that he sees for the last time. That was the message. So I would have to generally say, as far as spending taxpayers' dollars to scare him into thinking that that might actually be a reality, I mean, that's not really a bad spending of tax dollars right there. I mean, that certainly did literally put the looming threat right over his head in the form of the bomber itself. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least from what I could see. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Trism666, who puts in a $100 donation, a massive support, by the way. And thank you very much, Trism, for that support as well. And we do appreciate that very much. And Trism said, Willamette River and LSA.
And you know what? I'm going to pull it up. Willamette River. Willamette pronunciation. Let's see what it's pronounced like. So this is the American pronunciation.
Willamette.
Willamette. And then this is the British one.
Willamette.
Huh. So it's the Willamette or the or something along that river. So I thank you for the support and sharing that with us, actually, Trism666, because I do not know. I'm not incredibly familiar with that valley area, and I'm going to have to keep working on my pronunciation of that river, and also a lot of others. But you know one river I like a lot? The Columbia River. That's a name I could say really easily, and it's very American sounding. So I like that one. And I also like this other river down here in Utah. Y'all know the river that's down here? Y'all know the one? Do y'all? Well, do you? I'm trying to find it here really quickly. It is right here. And this is the Green River. They call it that because it's green.
Indeed.
man, he's like, bro, he crazy. He's like, indeed. And that's also a place where you can go and rub shoulders with people who don't really want to rub shoulders with you. You can't get any jobs there. Indeed. Not a great indeed. But beyond that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Jonathan Garcia, and Jonathan puts in a $20 donation. And thank you, Jonathan, as well, for that support, and we appreciate that very, very much. And Jonathan says, between the B-2 flyover and Putin getting forced into the beast, we definitely bullied Russia. And how do you think Putin took it? And LSA. Honestly, he looked like he got caught off guard, like, by all of it, because riding in the Beast, that was a little bit weird, because I thought they're supposed to take their separate vehicles, but he got in the Beast, and he rode over there in that vehicle, and then he got caught off guard by the flyover, and he also got caught off guard by the journalist screaming questions at him. So, not the usual setting that Putin would usually be in, to be honest, so I would say he was caught off guard. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say he's probably caught off guard. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Barry Alio, and a huge shout out to you, Barry, as well, for that support. He said, love the channel and what you guys do, and what are your honest thoughts on, and do you think that Russia would have ever invaded Ukraine if the UN didn't keep stepping on his toes, or does he just want more and to start World War III?
I don't think the UN ever stepped on his toes because Russia is a part of the Security Council and they get veto power on any decision the UN would make. So there's really no way for them to step on their toes because they can just stop the UN from doing that. I would say that if anything, the reason why the Russians started is because they're trying to realize some sort of a larger strategic ambition and a rebirth of a Russian sphere of influence, and that would generally be what started the war, at least in my opinion. But a big thanks to you for the support, Barry, and thank you for enjoying what we do, and I hope that answered that question incredibly well, at least in my opinion. And so, a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Alan Gwinner, and huge shout out to Alan for that 20 as well, and we do appreciate that. He said, the most foolish and ridiculous attempt to show strength, instead of showing how much of a ignorant negotiator we have representing us, asinine in short. I don't know. I don't know. Me personally, I'm not personally going to get into all that. Me personally, I disagree with the premise of bringing Putin here, but outside of that, though, we really can't really jump into the actual negotiating perspective of it because we didn't get to hear the actual negotiation. It was behind closed doors, and we really just don't know. So outside of that, I'm going to have to leave my opinion blank because we don't get into politics. But Enforcer, what say you?
I thank you for the support, Alan, and I would have to say I don't really get into a lot of that either. We stay politically neutral here, and so with that, we are going to be moving on to the next one. Also, really quickly, I saw someone say NATO stepped on his toes. Nobody stepped on Russia's toes. Like, NATO does not step on the Russians' toes. NATO is a defensive alliance. Every single country neighboring Russia wanted to get away from them and be safe from the Russians. That's why NATO has encroached on the Russians, is because everyone that was once bordering the Russians is running away from the Russians. That's a lot of people look at that the wrong way around, like NATO is an invading force pushing towards Russia. Everyone in NATO, everyone who's in NATO in Eastern Europe right now was running from the Russians and joined NATO. That's why NATO's on Russia's border right now. That's the truth of it. So I don't really know why a lot of people say NATO stepped on their toes, because also on top of that, if a country in the region feels threatened enough of the Russians to request to join NATO and then they're accepted, that's on the Russians. They ought to have been better neighbors, to be entirely frank, and not made the entirety of Eastern Europe so scared of them that they would end up joining NATO in the future. That's really the truth of it. Because you can't be the Russians and sit there and curb stomp the Chechens and then curb stomp the Georgians and then start going, oh, this is crazy. Why the hell is everyone running to NATO? Like they're scared of us or something. I mean, they're scared of them because the Russians made it clear, even from the collapse of the Soviet Union, they will go to war and commit heinous atrocities in every single war that they're in if they get the chance, if you're not in some sort of a larger military alliance that gives you some kind of safety assurances. That's why everyone in Europe ran to NATO. So, and that was also the reason why the Ukrainians were running to NATO, is because they got invaded in a light form by the Russians in 2014. And they said, we don't really want that happening to us again, so we want to go join NATO so that way the Russians cannot do that to us again. And then in response, the Russians started this war before they could get the chance to join NATO. That's the truth of it. Like, nobody is doing anything to the Russians in a realistic sense that is actually putting them at a severe disadvantage. Russia doesn't need to have a sphere of influence, a military sphere of influence that expands further on into Eastern Europe. They could easily start to work their geopolitical position right now to become an economic trading partner with Europe and just start growing their economic base off of that trade like they were already doing beforehand. It's slow work, but they could eventually do it. They chose not to. They chose that we want to make might the only right instead of trying to work on an economic level like everyone else does, like the Chinese are right now. We're going to do it this way. And that is where they failed. So generally, as far as Russia's claim, like on the Russian perspective, they want a sphere of influence to be in control of their own destiny, which from a Russian position, you could see why they're doing what they're doing. But from a Western position, there is absolutely no reason for them to do what they're doing. And they could have easily done any other sort of alternative or an option that did not result in a full-blown war. So I hope that does answer that somewhat well, at least from what I can. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, moving on to our next support here. This one goes to Mace, another longtime channel legend, and Mace puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Mace, for that support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. He said, Putin's face reminds me of that song, Under Pressure by David Bowie and Queen. Under pressure that burns a building down and splits a family in two, puts people on the streets, dee-da-day.
Damn. But big thanks to you for support, Mace, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, I gotta thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to hear that Putin's face reminds you of Under Pressure by David Bowie and Queen. And so a massive thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well, the best I can. And with that, before we move on to the next one, I now have someone say that I'm wrong on saying that NATO did not step on Russia's toes. And so what the answer is from this person is that NATO stepped on Russia's toes because Russia never worked on an economic level. That's a little bit weird to say, because I would say that the fact that they're an economic monolith that focuses on exporting crude oil and natural gas would generally show that they at least before the war, were pretty reliant on the whole economic side of things. Like, that doesn't even really work. Because every country in the world works on an economic level. Every country in the world works on trade. And that's how they make their money. So I don't really know how in the world you're making that claim. So the Russians have a justified reason to invade everyone in Eastern Europe because they don't work on an economic level. So what would even be the point of gaining these regions? It doesn't help to improve their situation. If they're not working on an economic level, they're still broke, poor, and they still don't have a good military. So what would it help them to have Eastern Europe at that point? Because generally everyone understands it would help them out by growing a small economic base for them that they could work a sphere of influence off of. Because saying that a country just is completely removed from operating on a monetary economic system, which doesn't exist. Like, the only country that doesn't work like that is North Korea, and look how well that's going for them. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I'd also have to say, I don't mean to say this in a way that's confrontational, but I've never heard of a PhD in security, of all things. Like, I've heard of a PhD of a Bachelor's of Arts in History, or a Bachelor's of Science in Political Science, or something along that line, but I've never heard of a PhD in security. I'm going to look that up really quickly. I might be wrong.
I think they have degrees in national security these days, I think, but I'm not sure.
Let's see. So it actually is something that exists, something that apparently you have to go to a very specialized college to get. But let's see here. Career paths. Let's see. So national security, cybersecurity, intelligence, and global security, homeland security, or strategic security. So it does exist, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, that still does not make a lot of sense to say the Russians don't work economically. Every country works economically. The Chinese work economically. If a country doesn't work like that, they collapse. So saying, oh, you know, like, let's let the Russians take Eastern Europe, it's justified for them because they don't work on an economic level. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, because if I remember correctly, the Soviet Union didn't work on an economic level, and they also collapsed. So they would be going for the same process, and then we'd be saying, okay, let's let everyone in Eastern Europe fall victim to their invasion, so that way they can also collapse with them a second time around. That just doesn't really make a lot of sense at all. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to LC39A once again, and he throws in a $131 donation this time. And thank you very much, LC39A, once again for that massive support. And also, I do see your pattern here that you do. You do $1 extra each time. It was a 130, then a 131. So I see what you're talking about tonight. But thank you very much, LC39A, once again. He said, we had 2 wars with the UK. When did relations change?
And I would have to say that the relationship changed with the United Kingdom actually not that long after the War of 1812. We actually started to grow a pretty positive relationship with them by the 1830s. Because we actually signed a treaty that actually ceded this area of Maine to us and also created the border along the 48th parallel, which exists right here. And this looks like a perfectly straight line until we get into the mountains over here. And let me see if I can show you all that really quickly. There is a small deviation of the actual border markers. I wish I could show that to you all a little bit better, because going over this terrain and creating a perfectly straight line, at least at the time, it was a little bit of a difficult thing. But let me see here really quickly if I can get that one. I think it was the Webster-Allen Treaty. Let's see, Webster-Allen Treaty. Was it? Let's see here. Daniel Webster. Oh, hang on. No, it wasn't that treaty. Hold up. Let me go get it. Let's see. Treaty 48th.
Webster, you say? He had to write a good treaty. He knows every word.
Let's see. The 49th parallel treaty. But there was another one. There was another one that ceded this little part of northern Maine to us. And was it the Ashburn Treaty? Hold up. Let me go pull it up. I got to go find it. The Ashburn Treaty. Maybe that was it. The Ashburton Treaty. Yeah, it was actually the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. So I got them all mixed up a little bit. But the Webster-Ashburton Treaty gave us this green border of the state of Maine. It divided this disputed territory amongst the British and the U.S. in the 1840s, and that's actually why the border of Maine looks like it does nowadays within this northern area, is because of that treaty. So by that point, we had actually normalized our relations enough with the British that we started to make treaties with them to actually lay out the kind of borders that we have today with Canada, considering that the Dominion of Canada was still a subject of the United Kingdom. And also, the reason why that relationship started to improve massively is that also during that period of time, the southern United States started to produce an exorbitantly large amount of cotton. And considering that Britain and France were also industrializing greatly at that time, specifically Britain, cotton was a very easy sort of a money-making thing in Britain. So a lot of interests in the United Kingdom started to heavily favor U.S. trade, which meant an improvement of relations to assure the flow of cotton into British cotton mills there in the U.K. to be able to produce cheap textiles with. So that was also a really big part of the improvement of British-American relations. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. But a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Marian Deemert, another longtime channel legend, and thank you very much, Marian, for that $20 support. And they said, Slava Ukraine, and Herom Slava.
And Slava Ukrainian, Haram Slava. And a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Marian Deemer, because it is folks like you who helped us to keep this thing running and make it possible. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And we've got a $20 support from Jared Martin once again, and thank you very much, Jared, as well, for that second support. He said, the free reign is part of the intimidation strategy. Russia looks worse in real life, and the gap in prosperity between the U.S. and Russia shows how dwarfish their country is militarily, economically, and culturally, and dollars well spent.
Perhaps so. It's apparently a little bit of a divided discussion on whether it was money well spent or not. Me personally, out of the outcome that we could have gotten, I think it didn't go that badly. That's still my opinion on it. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, folks, I have no clue what downtown Anchorage actually looks like. So let's go look at their downtown to see what the Russians would have seen. Oh. This is actually...
Oh, wow, downtown Anchorage is really nice. The outskirts of Anchorage are not so nice, in my personal opinion, but the downtown is pretty clean.
Honestly, man, this would give Moscow a run for its money, like even in the downtown area. That's it.
It doesn't really look American, though. It's like really weird. It kind of looks like...
European.
Yeah, like European or Canadian or something, like the way they've like designed the sidewalks and streets. Like, it doesn't look normal.
Yeah, it looks really weird. It's kind of really interesting, actually. But let's see here. Let's go to this neighborhood. Let's see what it looks like in a random neighborhood. Actually, this doesn't look that bad, really.
The house could do without the blue paint over there on the left, but other than that, though, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, it could do without the blue paint, but it could be worse. And I mean, this isn't really that bad, honestly. Not bad at all. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
And also, we have another 20 from Marian Deemer. And thank you very much, Marian, for that second support. And they said, I forgot, the pizza fund.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Marian Deemit, and throwing in some money for the pizza fund, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So a massive thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And someone said, hey, that's my house. What the hell are you talking about? That's not your house. Get out of here. Come on, man. But anyways, jumping into our next one, watch it really be their house or something. They'll be like, no, that actually is my house. I'm sorry. But anyways, our next one here goes to Robert Krogan, who puts in a $15 donation. And thank you very much, Robert, as well, for that support. He said, after all this foolishness and the dire straits Ukraine is putting on the Russian economy, will they be brazen enough to open more fronts?
I would say that the Russians... I would say the Russians probably would. I wouldn't say it's out of the question. They are fanatical at this point in the Russian government. It's quite clear, much like the Nazi government was. And even if a offensive would not make any strategic sense, they are still going to conduct them, much like the Germans were conducting offensives all the way up until the final moment where they literally could not anymore because the army was pretty much completely destroyed. I mean, hell, the Battle of the Bulge shouldn't have even happened. Or the Ardennes offensive, as the Germans would call it. It shouldn't have even happened because they largely had lost all of their offensive abilities at that point, and I believe that the Germans tried one last offensive before they got pushed back to the Silo Heights outside of Berlin, before the Soviets pretty much crushed them completely on the Eastern Front. Well, they had already crushed them completely by that point, without doubt, but I think that they will still continue offensives until the last moment where they just completely collapse in this conflict. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Alan Gwenner once again. He puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Alan, for that second support of the night as well. He said, check out Putin grinning ear to ear, riding in the Beast limo. He should be arrested and turned over to Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan? You give him over to that giant guy in Azerbaijan to turn him into a pretzel? Honestly, I wouldn't disagree with that. The Azerbaijanis want a piece of Putin at this point. Like, they're like, come here. Like, it's like, we want to do not nice things. Like that's what the Azerbaijanis are saying at this point. But yeah, he was grinning end to end in the Beast because he had never been in a nice limo before. He'd never seen a real one up till then. He was like a little kid in a fire truck kind of. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But that fine American leather and that Cadillac interior, you just can't beat it. It'd even make the Russians smile as much as a bastard Putin is. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that is addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to David Griffin, and David puts in a 10, and thank you very much, David, as well, for that support. He said, do you think that Russia will answer the B-2 stealth bomber intimidation with more nuke threat rhetoric?
I'm not really sure, actually. I don't really know. I have a feeling that Medvedev will keep saying drunken rants that will be supported by the Russian government. So, in a sense, yes, I think it'll be responded to, but not in a direct way. It's just a general part of the Russians' modus of operandum these days. So, with that, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
So this one goes to Alan Gwenner once again. He puts in a 10. He said, any attempts to negotiate with an insincere negotiator will end in frustration. Obvious observation. Hello, anyone out there? Is this mic working? Test, test. You're right. You're right, Alan. But, you know, unfortunately, we don't really get the say. We don't get the final say on it. If we want the final say, we got to somehow get a lot of money together and run for president or something. So we don't have the final say, but the way it went, I would say, like, I'll repeat it again. The way it went, I would say it was the best case result. Obviously, wouldn't have probably had the situation in the first place if we could have avoided it. But, you know, it's here, it's there, and it's yonder. But Enforcer, what say you?
Look, I've got to ask you, are you someone serious, or are you some kind of a joke? Anyways, as I was saying, negotiations are a very important thing. Negotiations have been going on since the dawn of time, in 2000 BC. Have you ever heard of the ENCIRCLED of Persia, or Assyria? Bulliet? Have you ever? Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do that for the 19th time tonight. But beyond that, I will have to agree with you, Alan Gwenner. Putin is never going to negotiate seriously. He's just going around running circles around people. And I think the best way to put his as the old saying goes, ass on the burner, is to just put extra sanctions on him, and then he might start talking seriously, or he might start World War III. But at that point, it's up to him, and we'll just have to react to whatever they do. But a big thanks to you once again for support, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to NK Production. It could be North Korean production, I'm not sure, but they put in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Mr. Kim, for that support. They said, on another topic, have you heard of the Kettle Valley Rail? I took a 1912 steam engine and 1940s rail cars. It was amazing, and those trains had real soul. It's too bad the rail line is no longer in service.
Let's see, the Kettle Valley Rail. I've never heard of that one, actually. Kettle Valley Rail. Let's take a little look at this. The Kettle Valley Railway. Oh, wow. This was an extensive system of the Canadian Pacific Railway. Let's take a little gander. So this was once where the railway ran. The tracks had been ripped up. When was this little branch demolished? Let's see here. At some point, probably in the 60s. Oh, no, it was the 80s, apparently. Yeah, so apparently it was sometime in the 80s or so, and then this bridge was destroyed in a forest fire. Very unfortunate, because that was one hell of a bridge. But beyond that, that is a very interesting thing to hear about. I didn't know a lot about the Kettle Valley Railway, because railroads are such an extensive part of Canada and the United States. There's so much of it, it's really hard to know a lot about any of it in a great deal. It's like better to go regional. So I generally researched and read a lot about the Southern Railway and the L&N, which are native to Alabama in a way, or at least the Southeast. And so I generally know a lot about how the railroads were laid out and the famous things like let's see, the Saluda grade, or for better yet, the Bowling Green branch line of the LNN, that sort of a thing, more so than I would know about the Kettle Valley branch up in Canada. But that was still very cool looking and really neat. And I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running NK Production and sharing a neat little piece of Canadian railroading history with us. So massive thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jared Martin yet again. And Jared put in a 10, and a huge shout to you, good sir, for that support. He said, Russia peddles fake history, and they revised their school history textbooks again recently, and Russians are actually unaware that Russia was allied with Germany at the beginning of World War II. It's that selective history.
Yeah, history, as far as it's taught to the public in its simplified form, is very, very propagandized. And that's one thing that I think really erodes a lot of people's trust in history, because most people don't care to delve into history a lot. So they only get the basic sort of a story. And generally, it's always built for a narrative. And that's something that, like, a lot of people don't really get the nuance of this whole thing. American modern history that's taught in schools is propagandized to a great extent. Like an extreme extent, actually. Like there's a lot of things that they just completely gloss over and they don't tell you about in American history books, about the beginning of the country's history, the middle part, the more so modern part in the 20th and 21st centuries. They'll just completely gloss over some particular things. Like anything, whether it paints America in a good or bad light, they'll largely just gloss over it and generally try and make a broader framework or a story to be told out of the whole of American history. And that's what the Russians do, of course, to a huge extent, is that they'll take history and completely propagandize it. So any bad part will just be whitewashed out. Like becoming an ally with the Nazis because the Molotov-Ribbentrop Act completely erased. And they will continue to do that time and time again. Like they also completely whitewash Stalin. Like they don't talk about the purges to a great extent. They're like, you know, he was a little bit overzealous in his duties and that was about it. They don't really go to the full extent of talking about the gulags and how bad they were and how many of them there were and all those sorts of a deal. Kind of like here in America, we don't really portray how chaotic a history America has had, which honestly I think is a big reason why a lot of people in America today say that it's worse now than ever, is because they don't know how much unrest has existed in this country since the beginning. Because I always hear, I always hear folks out there, especially in the modern political climate, they'll look at a riot or something and then they'll go, oh my God, this never has happened before. This is generally the worst time in American history. It's getting worse because it's never like this before. And it was always like that. Always like that. There was always something that people were getting killed over or beating each other up over or shooting each other for. There was always something in this country. Like literally at the beginning of the country's history, George Washington himself had to put down the Whiskey Rebellion. And before the Constitutional Convention of 1787, there was Shays' Rebellion, which also was a very significant one for its time. And then right after that, going on into the early 1800s, there were endless amounts of all sorts of battles and wars that were pretty much had on the fringe of the American frontier, which was in Illinois and Wisconsin, really, at that point, and down here in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And then there was more civil unrest that was going on during that time, and then there was even more growing civil unrest all the way up to the point of the Civil War about abolition, about workers' rights, generally about anything, like anything at all. There was always going to be some sort of a violent riot over. And then after the Civil War, there were endless amounts of violent riots in the southern United States, which was under military occupation at that point, for anything, race riots, you name it. There was endless amounts of those. Then that was when labor strikes and labor riots became really big in the country. Loads of people were getting killed and beat, and buildings were being burned from all that. And people just don't know any of that stuff because it's not really taught about in American history. Like they'll tell you, Lincoln united the country. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And there was a great deal of death and suffering in Civil War, and then it all just ended. And then magically we skip forward from the Civil War to World War I. Like nothing happened during that time. It's just portrayed as a generally peaceful time. And it's something that's really interesting with that. It's like, it's a very bizarre thing. They just don't tell you about that, so you just don't know. And so, like, when I ever say, and this is something that a lot of people won't believe, whenever I say in the modern day, like, people are like, oh, it's just, it's spiraling out of control in this country. I'm like, honestly, it's like always been out of control. It's always been a dumpster fire. People always be like, no, it hasn't been. It really has been. Like, it's always been. It never will end up not being the case, because anywhere where there's the interest of different interest groups, or in play in a democratic society, or in any society for that matter, even in a monarchy, for example, like the UK, there always will be some sort of angst, or angst as it's called in German, that will create social tension that will lead to riots or almost violent uprisings in a sense in the country over particular things at different times from these different interest groups, because that's just what they do from a sociological and historical perspective. So with that, I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well on top of that, at least with how history generally works for the public's perspective. But the deep intrinsic study of history is something that generally shows that there's a lot more of a gray area that exists than there is a black and white, clear as crystal, good and bad side of things. Unless if you're talking about specific instances, like, for example, Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. I mean, that's like just inherently evil. The Soviet Union was also inherently evil, and Pol Pot's Cambodia was as well. And there are other examples that span throughout history, like that, like the Mongol Horde, which was also incredibly atrocious in what they would do to people whenever they ran up against them. But in most of the time in history, as far as the governments or nations that are kind of called good or just kind of there's a lot of gray area to what they do that's good and bad, and it all just comes together to generally create a story, and you just take it as a story and nothing more. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I was just looking here on Twitter. I saw that the U.S. delegation was released. They released a list from the White House about who attended this meeting in Alaska. I just noticed something here because I actually didn't notice it earlier. The vice president did not attend in Alaska, which is kind of notable. I'm not really sure where the vice president was instead of being in Alaska, but it's kind of notable that he was not there. So I don't know why that was the case, and I wonder what he was doing instead, because I wasn't really aware that he wasn't even in the area. Apparently, he was somewhere else. But anyways, jumping on to our next one here, this one goes to Clayton Wilkie, and he puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Clayton, as well, for that support. And he said, good day, both enforcers, Matthew and Andrew, and hello, Clayton. He said, thank you for the great analysis on today's show, and happy birthday to Old Warrior, and have a great day, and pick one from the chat, please. And Clayton from Brisbane, Queensland, Australia.
And a big shout out to Brisbane in Queensland, Australia, a place we've never looked at on Street View. So we are going to give it the honorary Street View glimpse in downtown. What does it look like down here? Wow, this is actually really nice. This is cool. I like this building.
Very nice, actually. I like those trees.
Are these trees? What type of trees are these? Like, honestly, man, the leaves look like they're like paper mache.
It's like one of those fancy Gucci trees.
A Gucci tree. And then we have to take a look at this at their train station. Dude, that is a really cool view from the train station, actually. That's pretty neat. And what type of...
Isn't this where that guy's from, that politician that said, everyone's entitled to their sexual proclivities, but I don't care because people getting torn up in the outback daily by crocs, and I'm not letting
yeah,
get
this
away.
is where he's from. Yeah. Bro, this is it. Oh, my God.
That guy's a champ.
Bro, that guy is a legend, honestly, hilarious, but that's crazy. This is actually the city he's from, man. Like, that's nuts. Like, it just clicked for me, dude. I was like, oh my God, he's from here. But still, really cool city, Brisbane. One day I'd love to go to Australia. It's just that the flight time out there is really long. It's like 17 hours, and it's completely unaffordable outside of economy, which is very sad, and I don't like that. But still, really cool place beyond that. And I do thank you massively for the support, Clayton, and also thank you for enjoying the show and the analysis tonight. We try our best to make it all work and come together, and I hope that tonight we once again hit it on the nail. So massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Burnaby Alex, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Burnaby, as well. He said, if not cuddly, why cuddly shaped? And, oh, man.
And I gotta say, Burnaby, bears look cuddly, but one, they smell really bad. They stink to high heaven. And two, bears are dangerous. Like, they're very, very dangerous. They look cute, but don't let it deceive you. They will eat you alive and kill you in vicious ways. So always be careful around the bears. Like, never get close to them. And when you see one, stand your ground if you need to, but generally try and get away from them somehow, some way. Don't panic though and run. They'll outrun you and kill you. So just, be careful about the whole thing, but try and get away from them. But a big thanks to you, Lunsky, for the support, Burnaby. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Susan Lowell. And thank you very much, Susan, for that $30 support, by the way. We do appreciate that. And Susan said, how long does Putin have to live? And I just looked it up as I was curious, because I saw Putin's picture of his hands today, and his hands were looking pretty dried out. So I was like, how old is he? He's 72 years old. So he's not exactly what you'd call very, very old, but he's getting on up there in the age bracket, the sort of like the grandpa age bracket. So it makes you wonder, how much longer does he have? And nobody can really answer that question, but the Russian people might have an answer to the question. There's no telling, because of course he's in a country where a lot of people, just fall out of windows at basically at Putin's behest. So it makes you wonder, but I don't know. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say I wouldn't know, but it can't be that much longer, because the average lifespan in Russia is like 79. So maybe like 10 more years, and I think he'll be kicking the can. Because if the average lifespan is 79, and considering that he's going to have access to much greater health care than most normal people would, he'll probably live a little bit farther than that, but not much farther. He's certainly not living to his hundreds, I'll promise you that. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for the support, and helping this channel to keep on rolling, Susan, with your massive support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I see people are confused here about what I'm saying about the hands. Someone said the airplane's very, very dry. No, I mean like his hands like kind of looked old, to be honest with you. So let me go get the picture so that way I can show you all what I'm talking about here. There is the picture right there. So I just put it under our likes tab. Enforcer, if you can go grab that real quick and enlarge Exhibit A so that way I can show the hands here.
Enlarge Exhibit A. Let's see here. To the likes tab?
Yes. So right there you can see, this is the picture of Putin's hands I'm referring to here. We don't have the zoom in feature on Enforcer's computer because he doesn't have ability to like zoom in. But you can see from a distance there, barely, that his hands are very, very wrinkled, old looking, and he's obviously not a young man anymore. So there's no telling. Like I would say to me, honestly, both these individuals' hands are rather old looking, to be honest. Not judging or anything, because we're all going to be old one day. But, these are not spry young men. Let's just put it that way. Neither one of them.
They ain't spring chickens, is what Blood's trying to say, folks. That's what he's trying to say. And also, you can see the thrombosis right there in the right hand.
Also, try Control Scroll, by the way. See if you can zoom in with Control Scroll.
Oh, look.
Oh yeah, hey, let me give credit where credit's due. Run and Gunny said that, by the way.
Actually, it only allows me to scroll the interface, not the picture. So let me unscroll that. Yeah, so there's nothing we can really do to zoom in and enhance on this. Great idea, though. That was a really smart thinking, but sadly it doesn't work for the picture. But Matthew... Oh my God! Look, his hand! His hand! Oh my God! Like, look, his hand is dried and shriveled. Oh my God!
Oh my God! Look, veins! He's got veins in his hands.
Oh my God! He's got thrombosis, like it's or something like that. But anyways, man, I'll be honest with you, man.
Get him some lotion. He's dried out.
Bro. Man. Okay, that was passable. that was passable, man. That wasn't too bad. That wasn't too bad. But also, man, why the hell does Putin look like a little shrimp, man? He looks like a pipsqueak, really.
Yeah, he really does, honestly. I'll just say this once again, folks. Don't take everything I say as being political. I'm genuinely not trying to be political here. I'm just making a comment on facial expressions, and that's solely it. That smile over there on that fellow's face on the right, the president, is like. I don't even think I smiled like that on like when I was a kid on Christmas. I'll be honest with you. That is like a genuine smile. You can't even fake that one right there. It's like I I guess he got what he was asking for. He got his photo, I guess, because he is like gleeful as hell. Like I've never seen someone that gleeful, to be honest with you. That's been a long time.
Bruh, Putin's like, this is the worst time of my life. I was just threatened outside with a B-2 bomber. Meanwhile, the president, honestly, I'm having a great time. Like, this couldn't be any better. It's just man, this picture is a trip. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than Alex Street, who puts in a 5, and thank you very much, Alex Street, for that $5 support. He said, it's tourist season in Alaska. All the hotels were booked months in advance.
And that's an interesting note, Alex Street. That is an interesting note. But they still could have done something for them rather than putting them in like their flood victims down at Hurricane Helene. So I would have to say that, good point. But there would have been some sort of better accommodations that they could provide, because technically there would be some spare facilities somewhere to provide them, and they went to the bare minimum. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Christopher Menard, who puts in a $5 donation. And thank you very much, Christopher, as well. He said, thank you for the info, brothers, and keep up the amazing work, and LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for enjoying our work, and we will keep it up. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from White Lightning 777. And it's been a minute, good sir. Welcome to see you.
Hey,
and well, good to see you once again, and welcome back. That's what I was trying to say. But thank you very much, White Lightning, for that $5 support. They said, is that guy with an American t-shirt an American? And if an American was stupid enough to fight for Russia, what are the penalties?
I wouldn't know if he was an American. But if you were an American that fought for the Russians, you're captured by the Ukrainians, you're treated like any other prisoner. And so that's basically the rundown on. There's no special treatment for him. And also the Department of State would probably not ask for his return or be that apt to ask for it unless they were pressured a great deal. So with that, I hope that has addressed it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I don't know if y'all saw this, but Lavrov came into his hotel the other day or this morning or sometime wearing a CCP or CCCP like T-shirt or whatever, or a hoodie, literally like harkening back to the old days and things like that. So, there was a lot of like gesturing going on for the Russians to allegedly be showing up with like a pure heart, clean hands, and good faith. A lot of gesturing going on, which indicates that their boss, Putin, is playing everybody like a fiddle. So, why would you show up wearing a shirt that you know is going to provoke the American side if you really meant peace? Probably because you're not serious. That's probably why. But I found that kind of interesting. But jumping on to our next one here, this one goes to Mike Zibrod, who puts in a $5 donation. And Mike said, what happened to the dude carrying that black briefcase for Putin? I didn't see him on the red carpet, and that flyover was pretty impressive.
The flyover was pretty impressive, in my opinion. I thought it was pretty cool. What happened to the briefcase guy? I wouldn't know, unfortunately. I think that would be something the security detail would know of the Russians. But unfortunately, I never got to see where that guy ended up. So I'd have to declare ignorance on that question in particular. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Azim, and Azim puts in a 5. They said, without love, nothing's possible. Love, peace, patience, faith, gentleness, goodness, kindness, meekness, charity, joy, happiness, and forgiveness.
And I would have to agree with you, Azim. And I got to thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and throwing out some truth right there. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Jared Martin. And Jared said, once again, he said, by the way, there was an article about a Russian woman who eliminated the adopted Ukrainian child and got 5 years.
Only 5? That seems
really?
Like
it should be life.
Yeah, that seems like it would be at least be several decades at a minimum to life, or at least that's what it would be here in America. That is wild and absurd, honestly, and I got to thank you for the support, and I hate that that actually was something that you had as a fact to be able to share. That's a very unfortunate fact to hear, but a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to David Kendall, 8Webs, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, David Kendall, for that support. And also, while we're at it, a huge shout out to Matt Davino, who threw in a 5, and also Robert Krogan, who threw in a 4, and Plazoth, who threw in a 3. And a huge shout out to Plazoth, Robert, Matt, and David for that support. We do genuinely appreciate that. We also have a 5 from WS, and WS said, did y'all talk about the power play that the president pulled in air, changing the meetings format from 1v1 to 3v3, and glad the Russian hawk was there.
And I got to thank you for support, WS. I think we actually did not cover that tonight, but it was a very interesting sort of a move to be sure. And so a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jason Curling, who puts in a 4. And he said, how is Mr. Corgi and dog treats?
And I thank you for support, and I think Mr. Corgi is doing just fine. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, and thank you very much, Sarge, for that $2 support as well. It's good to see you once again. He said, LSA, hit the like button. That's an order.
Hey, and hit the like button, folks. That is an order from none other than LSA Sergeant Figment. And a big order at that. We've actually gotten up to 4,700 likes tonight. That's a lot of them. Oh, wowee. And hopefully we'll be able to get on up to 500. Yippee. Hooray. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Bruce Lee, for that support once again. He said, country with no free press, depressing, LSA.
And I gotta say, Bruce Lee, that's a pretty good joke, man. To get that drum beat ready. Country with no press, call it depressing. Thank you, everyone. I'll be here all week.
I tell you what, he's doing a good job out here.
Oh man, do we have a laugh track, bro? If we have a laugh track, we're gonna be rolling in the money here. Come on, hit us with the laugh track, man. Come on, find one quick, Jack. Come on, hit us.
I don't have a laugh track, but I got the next best thing.
Shangu! Hey! Yeah, who's here ready to laugh? But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you once again for support, Bruce Lee, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
That was actually unintentional right there. That just came out of the blue. But anyways, let me close that so I don't accidentally click one. Our next one here goes to Michael Tripto. And thank you very much, Michael, for that $2 support. He said, Russia rocks, USA sucks. Joking. I'm glad you're joking. The USA is good, my friend. Russia is the one that sucks. But Enforcer, what say you?
I was about to say, Michael, I thought you flipped sides right there. I was about to declare you a traitor of the Republic. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because America is the best, by far. We have no problems. No problems at all. We are a perfect country. There is no flaws here in America. You heard that right, folks. America is perfect. For 250 years, America has been excellent. No issues. Nothing to improve. I'm kidding, by the way, before someone comes in here. It's so wrong. Obviously, there's things to improve. It's just a joke. Everyone calm down. It's okay. And nothing's changing here because I said that tonight as a joke. So don't worry. The world is not imploding. But it does not have a single problem. I mean, I'm just being honest here, folks. It's the only country on the world that has a spotless record of being perfect. None other. I mean, truly. Are you kidding me? You know, think about it. Think about it. There's no crimes in this country. What crimes? Matthew, have you heard of anyone conducting a crime lately?
Crimes? I hadn't heard about any crime. I don't know.
Exactly. Have you ever heard, Matthew, of anyone going poor in this country or going hungry? No, I haven't.
Going poor? I hadn't heard about nobody going poor.
I haven't heard about that either. Has anyone ever heard of any sort of atrocities possibly being conducted by an American or the American government? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's never happened. Never happened. Matthew, has it ever happened?
What is this, like your audition speech to be the new Russian leader or something?
Yeah, I'm trying to become Xi Jinping. Nothing ever happened in Tiananmen Square. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Bruce Lee. And thank you very much, Bruce Lee, for that $2 support. And also, we did get that earlier one, by the way. He said, did my $5 chat go through? It did, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support. And we also have his $2 support. He said, use of a soundboard, a sound decision, and LSA. And do you really think so, sir? Do you really think so?
Thank you so much for support. And the soundtrack, we're going to keep that down to a nice, quiet roar. We're not going to use it a lot because, honestly, I think if we used it a great deal, it would cheapen things up. But in the question segment, I think it's fine. Of course, we had to have someone earlier say, soundtrack too much, stupid, leaving, will not like. And to that...
That's okay. That's okay.
That's okay.
It's a free country, Jack. It's, guess what? We can't keep you here. Nothing.
That's okay. That's okay. I mean, you know, I thought for this particular person, like 3 years of consistent news coverage would have done it for him. But apparently, a soundtrack's breaking the bank or breaking the camel's back. We can do great news coverage for 3 straight years, but one use of a badum from a soundtrack and they're gone. A little bit interesting with how people work that whole deal. But anyways,
I'm surprised he didn't leave when we did the whole like Rodney Dangerfield thing. Like, if you're going to leave over something, I feel like the impression of like Mike Tyson, Rodney Dangerfield,
the current president, the former
drone
president.
strike. Yeah, like that would probably like do it. But the thing that broke the camel's back was that damn badump tisk. That sent him out. Like, who would have known?
Bro, it sits there and listens to us come up with the most ridiculous jokes. Sometimes they're not even good. Like, I even know they're not even good. We'll stay here for years for that, and then one badum. That's it, you bastard! Like, it's like, bro, you sat through every anecdote for 3 years, and then that's the one. That's it. Like, you can't handle it. Like, I don't even know it. Like, I don't even understand it. I don't even get it. Like,
I mean, I think we've gone generally schizo on here before, and he didn't even leave over going
Yeah.
schizo, but he left over badump tisk. I mean, come on, man. Like, I guess it's, some people get triggered, I guess. That apparently he's got bad memories about that. One day he went to do a open mic night, and the comedian probably tore into him or something, and they did a little badump tisk when they talked about the hairline, and he ran out.
Man, I will bet you, man, that I guess someone ended up in this situation and that happened, and then you know he didn't like that one from then on. Did not like that one at all. He said, "Sir, you've got to stop. I'm going to quit the channel if you do the badum one more time." And I said, "Well, rev up those fryers because comedy will never die. Hit it, Matthew. Hit it for me. Come on, do it. You got to hit it. It's a great thing. It's a perfect time." And he's fake news. That's fake news, right?
They're turning off the cameras. They're bringing in the insects. They're literally hauling the insects in. They're bussing them in. They're bussing them into the back hallways. Look at them. They're turning off the cameras. They don't want you to see all those crickets. They just brought them in here. They're fresh crickets, the loudest crickets.
The wicked lying media brought in an entire tank of crickets, dropped it off into the middle of the rally, and they started making a lot of noise, and everyone said, "Well, everyone hates them," and no, they didn't hate me. They just dropped the crickets in the middle of my audience. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely pathetic. I thought that they couldn't reach a new low, but they reached a new one tonight with the crickets. I've never heard such a thing in my life. Who the hell has even heard of a cricket? I'm from New York City. There's no such thing as wildlife in New York City, much like crickets.
They're bussing them in so fast. I've never seen a bus move that fast. I said, whose bus is that? Because I need 2 of those because they're moving so fast they could get me across the country in no time. I said, 1 hour, sir. 1 hour, sir. That could get you across 2 states. 2 states. But instead they used it for crickets. They said, haul the crickets in, rev up the buses, rev up the fryers, send in the crickets, open the doors. They're just opening all the doors and those windows, those beautiful windows. They're opening them all and letting them right in.
I gotta be honest with you, it's a crazy thing what they're doing with these crickets these days, but outside of that Russian diplomat, he gave me a pretty good laugh today. He almost got himself killed by a bear. I guess he thought it was the one that RFK Jr. dropped off in Central Park. He was like, "Is it dead?" He found out it's not. It's still alive. Look at it. He's walking up to it. He's like, "Is that the one? Is that the one?" And now it's not because it's living. Look, it's moving. He's shocked by this.
Imagine if this Russian right here was him. John, go get the car. I see a bear. Go get the car.
Man, bro. No, man, if you like heard what was going on in his brain, it'd be, "Oh, yeah. And then it'd be the worm going, "Get the bear." Like, "Get the bear and run it over him." Like, it's
that worm said, "Yeah."
Man, also, man, this guy was so stupid, bro. Like, look at him. The bear starts moving, and he turns around to the cameraman, and he says something in Russian, like, "Oh God, it's alive, and it's like moving. Like, look, like, watch, like, the bear starts moving. Watch him. Oh God, it's like moving. Look at that. That's crazy. It's like an animal or something. It's like, bro,
what's insane to me? What's insane to me is that poor fisherman over there had no idea that bear was literally sitting right there. The fisherman, if he'd have seen that, I'd imagine would have probably gotten out of there, or at least like gotten some bear spray out or something if he'd have known it was there. But the goofy Russian like is walking up to the bear. It's like, what the hell? It's like, these are not like, I don't even know. Like, okay, the myth is in Russia, obviously the bears are like a symbolic thing for Russia. So, you know, there's videos of people like wrestling bears and petting them and stuff like that. Like, you know, the stereotypical tough Russian that can wrestle the bear and stuff like that. It's like, listen, I don't know how it works in Russia, but these are like legit bears. Like, you know, we've got here, like these things are not like friends or something like that. I don't even think they're friendly in Russia, to be honest with you. I think some of those bears might be domesticated or something to a certain degree.
Bro,
but
they hide. They huffing jet fuel.
Yeah, or something. They're giving them like, you know, that like what they call it, a bee smoker or something. They're doing something to calm them down because like bears are not chill like that. Like especially not the wild ones like that.
Man, honestly, man, I think Russians like operate as a natural bear repellent because this thing never even looked at him, and it was just like, I smell shit, and then started running off. It's like, bro, you smelled the Russian approaching him, and it ran away. You'd think it'd be the opposite way around, but no, it actually works the other way with Russia. Look at this guy. He's like, wow, look, oh God, it's running. That's crazy. It's like a real animal. I bet you this guy's never been out of Moscow or St. Petersburg, and so he doesn't actually know what wild animals are.
Yeah, probably not. It was just goofy. I saw this happening earlier. And you know they would have blamed the United States if he got mauled. They'd been like, oh, yeah, the United States should have had security for him so that way the bear didn't maul him. It's like, well, we're not responsible for him walking up to a wild animal.
They would have said that the park rangers would have had to come out around this park, and they would have had to, you know, get this guy's jollies off, and then tell him all the stupid. They would have made a whole list of things that America failed to do to help this guy out, and honestly, nothing could help this guy out because he's just stupid. And what's even crazier is that this was the top negotiator that they brought with Putin to be involved in the negotiations today. So this guy was actually sitting beside Putin in the conversation with the president of the United States today. This was the guy.
And can you imagine that the Russians had the audacity to tell the United States delegation to leave Keith Kellogg at home because they didn't want him anywhere nearby. But yet they bring this guy right here who walks with wild bears to come to the talks. It's like, okay, that's who Putin wants. Putin wants the ones that don't really have their stuff all together to show up because he doesn't want anybody to actually say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. This guy right here with the bear situation, he's not going to say that at any point.
Bro, Putin's like, I only want the best negotiators, the strongest of minds. Meanwhile, the negotiator, duh, let's go look at this bear. Like, and he's just walking right up to a bear. Yeah, like even folks, like even if it is an adolescent bear, that's clearly like an adolescent. That's still stupid to do because you don't know if that thing's going to freak out and charge you.
Yeah, it could freak out. You never know, especially when you got this guy. Also, what vehicle are you using? Like, is that some type of? That looks like an American rental car. I think that he's in right there.
It looks like a Suburban of some kind, you know, like a Chevy Suburban, maybe.
Yeah, maybe so. Surely the Americans didn't pull him up here to let him out.
Also, man, what in the world was this hand motion at the end? Like, did you literally do a hand motion like, hey, what gives? Like, look, watch. What gives? Like, did he really just do that? Like the bear was supposed to come up to him and he was supposed to have like a Snow White moment where he like petted the bear and everything. Is he that stupid?
This guy right here might have been the false flag operation that Putin was trying to put into motion. Putin told this guy, listen, we need a sacrifice. Someone has to go down, and we have to pin it on the United States. And you're the candidate. And this guy said, oh, okay. So they sent him out here. They sent him out here to go chase down the bear. And then this guy got insulted. He said, well, the bear doesn't even want to eat me. It's like, oh, well, I mean, you know, they don't want to eat everybody. Like, yeah, I guess. Like, I've never really seen a bear turn down a food or a snack, but you
turn
know,
down a food.
That one. Yeah, it turned out a food or a food stuff, but it did.
Man, this guy's out there. I was supposed to sacrifice myself for the Russian state. What gives?
He's insulted.
Man, oh my goodness.
He's like, hey, did you want to come have a taste?
Why is he British?
I don't know. That's the only impression I had.
Didn't want to have a taste, then, Governor. Bro, honestly though, that whole deal there, the visit of the Russians to Alaska was a trip. Honestly, folks, I think that we ought to invite them back again, but not bring Putin, just Lavrov and the rest of the negotiating team, and just let them wander around. Like because it'll be interesting itself. Just let them wander around the Chugach National Forest right outside of Anchorage for like 2 days and see what happens. Because that would be interesting in its own right. If they're that stupid, what in the world would they get up to in the woods for 2 days? I have no clue. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to David Kendall, 8 Webs once again. And thank you very much, David, for that second support tonight. At 20 this time, and we do appreciate that very much. And I'll just double check and make sure. I don't think there's a comment attached, and there isn't. But he put in the super sticker of the YouTube creature just looking in the mirror. It's just so happy with his appearance right there. I'm glad to see how thing's so happy with it. It could be a very confident YouTube creature, or it could be a narcissist. There's no telling. Hopefully it's the first one. But thank you very much, David. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say, I think that thing's probably a wicked narcissist, but I do thank you massively for the support, David Kendall, and help this channel to keep on running, because there's folks like you who help this thing to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, by the way, I see Snow White said, I'm about to watch the whole situation for the first time. I did not watch it today. It was a doozy. I'll be honest with you, it wore me out. Like, I watched the whole situation unfold. I was tweeting like a fiend on Twitter about it, and I was trying to keep up with it live because I want to actually follow it live. By the time it was over with, it was just a few hours. Like, I think it was like 4 hours total or something between the planes landing in Alaska, the meeting taking place, etc. I was like, geez, I wasn't even there. And I'm tired from like watching this thing right here. And you can see the look on the president's face. He was like just finished, like after the whole thing was over, after hearing that ranting that Putin was doing about the history of Russia. So I did good luck to you. That's all I got to say. But our next one here goes to $2 Garage once again, who puts in a 2 and says Putin is the average amateur historian.
Oh man, he's not really like the average amateur historian, in my opinion. He's the one that like really specialized on one specific thing, but not like just a small thing like World War II that lasts for like 4 years for America's involvement, or 6 for most everyone else. He's the one who like got focused on a specific country, and he can tell you everything about it, but nothing about anything else. That's what he reminds me of, because your average amateur historian will get like really heavy into like World War II, and they'll be like, oh, in World War II, this and that and that. And you'll be like, oh, you're really big into history. And you'll think, like big into history is in like big into history, like history in general. And they're like, oh, no, just World War II. Yeah, World War II. You want to know about a Tiger tank? And I'd be like, no, I'm good. And I've heard about that 900 times. Oh yeah, you want to hear about the V1 Doodlebug? And for some reason, they only know about the Germans. Like, they don't know about anything else. And I always find that weird, how a lot of the amateur World War II historians only know about the Germans and like nothing else. Like, you ask him, oh, so like, do you know how like the rationing system worked in the UK at like 1940? Oh, no, I don't know. But the Germans had this pretty cool bomber, the Heinkel 111. I'm like, how the hell is this like your only historical knowledge? Like, this like takes like some simple Google searches to find out, and like everyone makes videos on it, so it's not hard to know. And that is an interesting one, honestly. But I do thank you massively for support, $2 Garage. And I would have to agree to you to some extent. He is like an amateur historian, but not your average one. He's like that specialized amateur historian that like learns everything up and down about one specific niche of a country and nothing else. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $2 support from Burnaby Alex. And he said, Dad grew up in Przemysl. And I'm probably butchering that, but he said, so he knows firsthand.
Przemysl, that would be right here. Right here, actually, yeah. This is the little town of Przemysl right there. How the hell did I know? I don't know. I think I took a good guess at that, Burnaby Alex. For some reason, it just like registered in my head. Yeah, Przemysl. Oh, yes, the wonderful town of Przemysl. If I'm saying that correctly, but let me see here. Oh, this is a cool town. Look at that.
Oh, that is a nice town. Your father grew up in a nice place here. Oh, look, they have a bear in the middle.
Bro, they have a bear.
And cub.
A bear and cub and fountain. And then they have nice buildings all throughout the city. Very beautiful looking city. Oh, look at that. The old town square with the cobbled stones. And I like this place, actually. This is really cool. But I do think...
All you're missing is some lemon.
You know, all you're missing is some linens. Like, man, a couple of linens strategically scattered around the city. But I do thank you so much for the support and sharing that with us, Burnaby Alex. And I would have to say, anyone who grew up in a Russian world, the Ruski Mir, or at least the one that existed before, they know it's not a good thing to return to. That's why Poland's a part of NATO today, and they made the right choice for their own security for that reason. But a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to I Grow Runts. Thank you very much for that $1 support, by the way. And we also have a 1 from Robert Krogan yet again. And thank you very much, Robert, as well. And we also have a 2 from Bruce Lee. And Bruce said, Russian bear guy to be promoted to bear scat, apparently soon.
Huh. Maybe so. It looks like he escaped that, though. He's flying back to Russia, I believe, right now, or earlier. But a big thanks to you once again for support, and it was close. It was very close. Like, it was getting there. But a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the Morse code decoders and the live chats. Due to time constraints tonight, we'll be getting the Morse code decoders, 3 live chats, and then rounding out tonight's stream. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
And this one is going to go to our Morse code decoders. We had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Airbo Garbo, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, and Kobiel Terix. They said the Morse says, Putin and his Russian press got treated like clowns, LMAO. That was pretty funny, and LLT LSA.
And that's the sound of money. Y'all got that dent on the nail. That's the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all greatly for making sure to get that Morse code message correct time and time again. The Lee Springer Signal Corps has never missed a message and never will. So massive thanks to you once again for enjoying this channel. And, of course, deciphering that Morse code message. And with that, we also have another $10 super chat from AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang. And all he did was throw in a trophy. And we're massively appreciative for that. Hey! And so, a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Erling Gruel. And Erling said, Enforcer Matt, did you see the protest by the Alaskans? And I did. They were lining the streets in Anchorage. And honestly, it was a good sight to see because one thing that we need to remember in America is, obviously, now I will say this. I'm going to give a big disclaimer up front. I do not support riots at all. Like, that's not protest. That's a riot. So if people are out there tearing stuff up, I'm not in support of that whatsoever. In fact, those people should be locked up because you shouldn't be tearing up stuff in America. That's our taxpayer dollars paying for that stuff, and you don't have the right to go tear it up. But the protest, though, the right to protest in America is literally a cornerstone of the country, and I love it to see it when people actually have the effort and, I guess you say, the gumption to actually go out there and do it. And the Alaskans did it. They were lining the streets, and they had the banners and everything, basically calling out Putin for being a war criminal, basically saying they didn't support him coming to America, and also telling them to basically bring the children back to Ukraine, which is something that needs to be said. And I'm glad to see they were saying it. I'm also glad to see the First Lady wrote the letter to give to Putin as well, asking about the children as well. So good on the Alaskans for doing that, because if there is no presence of protest out there, then it could be assumed that maybe people don't care. But because there are people out there, it sends a clear message that people and the public clearly care about the issue, and that's important to let the politicians see that, so that way they don't try to brush it under the rug. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree with that completely. And I would have to say that the protests were a good thing to see, and it's good to know that there are a lot of people in Alaska who do understand the Russians are not our friends. And so big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I don't know why I'm even saying that. That was a live chat. What the hell am I saying here? Am I going crazy, Matthew? I probably am. But anyways, for that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to ALEXA. I'm not going to say the name because it might set off voice assistants around somebody's house. But
right, man,
they said, yeah. What? Well, I don't even know how to imitate it, to be honest. But they said, is Putin maybe not right in the head, like health-wise? Seriously. No, he's not right in the head. Health-wise, I mean, there's always been rumors around Putin's health. There's people said he's got like a terminal illness. Nobody really knows, and obviously they collect all of his, waste and things like that, so nobody can actually test anything to find out. But they may have an idea. It may not be publicized exactly if he's terminal or something like that, but it's just a rumor. But whether or not if he's in the right state of mind psychologically, I would say he's obviously not. Anybody that can like senselessly, take people out and eliminate people without a second thought, I would say they're definitely definitely not right in the head. But Enforcer, what say you?
Listen, Matthew, are you some kind of a joke? Are you a news reporter? And now we have to talk about mental illness in a serious way. Mental illness is a very serious thing. Blah, blah, blah. 2 hours later. Like, are you some kind of a stupid guy, or are you like a serious man? Anyways, and like, it's like, oh my god, he keeps going, dude. I remember, folks. It still haunts me that I lost like 3 hours of my life listening to that Tucker Carlson Putin interview, because I remember having to listen to it because I knew it was going to be a big thing and a lot of people were going to be talking about it. I was like, I got to sit down and listen to this whole damn thing, and I listened to it, and by the end of it, I was absolutely worn out. It mentally exhausted me. It really did. I was like, oh my god. I was like, who in the world can handle this? And like the historical facts were just clearly wrong. And I was like, this is just insane. But beyond that, I do have to say that as far as him being wrong in the head, from the misquote history that badly and say it with that much confidence, and even walk around with all of these files and pages like one of those deranged people on the memes, Matthew, who goes around with those weird obscure memes like the Dolphin Man and like just opens up the binder and then points at it and shows the people. He does that shit with this little stupid maps that he's got. It's like, I know, like, he's got to be unwell in the head to do that in the first place. Second off, he's a dictator and a pretty cruel one at that. So I'd also say that he's sick in the head for that as well. So yes, there is something wrong.
Did you show him those? Did you show him those binders, by the way, that they brought in? Did you show him a picture?
No, I consider that bonus information. We'll show those to y'all really quickly. It's worth it. Because it was.
I'm scrolling down to go grab it right now. Let's see here. I put it into the likes tab.
Okay, cool. That'll make it quicker. Let me go to the likes tab. Because it was just freaking nuts. Look at this. Like, that is like a Bible's worth of thickness right there.
That's a lot of crap. And you see there appears to be looks like a Russian flag on the front of that one right there. And they brought along pens and stuff to annotate it. So, oh my God. I can only imagine what they were going through back over there. Also, notice I know they do this in formal settings, by the way, but notice they definitely put the white like covers on top of these drinks right here. Like they definitely did the white covers on the drinks with Putin nearby. But yeah, literally they got an alligator clip on it. They got like a stack like super thick. Can you imagine what they were putting like the U.S. delegation through back there? If Putin came out and gave everybody that rant that he did in the public, I can only imagine what the hell is going on behind closed doors.
You see, it all makes sense because of this map that Saint Gregory made in the 16th century. Let me show this to you right here. This was commissioned by our son. So, dude, I remember when he did that in the Tucker Carlson interview, and like, I was just sitting there, and at that point, I was like, damn. I was like, he's going all the way back to a map from like 600 years ago to try and justify a claim in the present day. I'm like, this is just absolutely batshit. Like, this is insane. Like, I've never seen anyone do that in my life in a serious setting, and he did it. And he did it again, apparently. He did it again. And also, I like how you had to put the flag of the Russian Federation. It's not even the flag of the Russian Federation. I think it's the flag of one of the types of flags of the Russian Empire, because they technically didn't have an official flag, and I think it's that one right there, because you could see that it has the eagle on it.
Yeah, that eagle is like got like a snake like version of a head on it. Like that is the most like reptilian looking eagle I've ever seen.
Man, that thing looks like it goes like a snake. Like, it's like, bro, I wouldn't trust that thing. Also, I don't like how the crowns are just floating above its head, you know?
Yeah, I don't like that either. Like it's some type of XP points in the game.
Man, let me go show you a similar bird, the Astrakhan, because they have a bird as well. Let me go show it to you.
Ostrich?
The Astrakhan. That's technically what Austria is called. Let's see. Eagle. Here we go. That's a pretty cool looking eagle. Like that one, like this one right here. This is, I think, the traditional Austro-Hungarian eagle of Austria-Hungary. That one's pretty neat. Looks like an eagle. Fairly Germanic. This one, though, looks like a chicken bake at Costco.
That's no chicken bake I've ever seen. This thing right here looks like something you might like cook up or something if you were in a survival scenario or something. Like you were like on your last leg and you're like, I gotta eat something. And you see that thing crawling around, you're like, there it is. It's like chop oven, like the oven time.
Man, honestly, bro, and this bird looks even worse, man. This one looks like it's going, oh, or something like that. It's like, bro, it looks like he's laughing like Jeff Bezos, honestly.
Oh, I guarantee this bird ain't got billions though.
Man, dude, this bird's got billions of problems. Like that's what this bird's got.
I may not be a bird, but when you got billions, you can fly. Oh,
Oh man, that soundboard, man. That's something. That's something, man. But yeah, he had this giant stack. It was insane. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So, who was like the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
So before we get to that last question, we do have one more super chat that came in. This one came in from Russ Rizzo, who put in a 5. And thank you very much, Russ, for that $5 support. He said, "How about a UFC pay-per-view for the next negotiation?"
Oh, that's an interesting idea. That's an interesting idea. You know, why not? Why not? Why the hell not? Why the hell not? Why not? I don't see any reason as to why not. Why not? Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's watch them go at it. Honestly, I'll be honest with y'all. My money's on the President of the United States. I think he could put a whipping down on Putin, me personally. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Manny, what do you think, Manny? Who's your money on?
Well, I would say that he could give him a good spanking. You know, he could like get the little magazine, you know, with like the cover on it and everything, like, you know, sort of wad it up. You know how you do with those magazines, you like roll them up and you twist them and stuff like that, and you get them into like a rod almost, like those magazines. Tell you what, and you go.
Listen, I don't fight in the normal MMA style I do at WWE. I'm going to take him furniture shopping. I'm going to take him furniture shopping, and I'm going to do wine and dine.
He's got the magazine. Oh, no.
No,
he's coming in with the magazine. Forget that chair. He's got the magazine.
Not at all. Not at all, unfortunately, Matt. Let me explain. I'm going to wine him and dine him after I take him furniture shopping, and then I'm going to bring him back to the hotel room, and Putin's going to be like, okay, now it's on. Now we're boxing. And then all of a sudden, Zelensky comes out of the closet with a steel chair. Like, but anyways, that's how it ought to go. WWE style, not MMA. The president's more of a WWE guy. Although I
think the U.S. president's got him beat, though. I think the U.S. president's got Putin beat in a match because, like, I think the size difference is going to be a huge factor. Putin is very small compared to the U.S. president.
Yeah, I mean, he's tiny. Like the president's like a giant compared to him. The president's actually my height. So like honestly, anyone compared to Putin would be a giant in most normal senses. I mean, the guy's fairly small. He's like 5'5" or something like that. Not tall at all. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best we can, and it is, of course, the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much.
Wait, we had one more. We had to get our final question.
We didn't?
No, that was a super chat.
Oh, damn. Oh, okay. Well, let's get on to that final question of the night. Who was the lucky last person threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Bia Arthur, who said, "Who had a worst visit, in y'all's opinion, with the American president? Was it Putin or Zelensky?" I would say, honestly, Zelensky did have the worst meeting, I will say. Putin got punked, like, here and there, but he didn't get the overall, like, you know,
shellacking.
Honestly, kind of beat down that Zelensky got. Zelensky got done wrong. Like, I'll never get off of that one right there. Zelensky got done bad wrong. And that's like one of those moments in American history that I wish we could undo and go back and correct that. But, you know, it's in the past at this point. There's no correcting it. It is what it is. And it'll always be remembered as at least in my personal opinion, is a day that I'm not super proud of when it comes to diplomatic relations with allies. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say Zelensky did get it worse. We did punk around on Putin a little bit, which was kind of cool. But Zelensky got a shellacking when he got here, so I would say that he got it worse, in my honest opinion. But with that, I hope that does answer that well. And now it is officially the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for having been here tonight and enjoyed this stream. We reached a peak viewership tonight of 16.1 thousand people, and we have had 150,000 people watch this stream before it ended. We're entirely honored and appreciative of each and every one of y'all watching this show and enjoying it, and we thank you all so much once again for being here with us tonight. And there's still 6.6 thousand people here with us as we're rounding this thing out. Absolutely wild, because that used to be, back in the day, the very peak of our viewership here on stream, and now this is the lowest point in the viewership since we started. And so a big thanks to you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, sleep well, and of course, we will see you all tomorrow. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Long live the Lee Spring Army, long live the Republic, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you all to 150,000 people that were here by the end of the stream. A whopping amount of people here tonight, and we appreciate every single one of you, just like always. And we will see you tomorrow on the Short War video if there is enough news to make, which the Enforcer will be making tomorrow, and also on the stream as well, tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern. So thank you all once again for another great stream, and all 5,000 likes, by the way, a crazy amount of likes by the end of it as well. But we will see you all then. And of course, love Ukraine, Heroam Slava, and get some rest and good night.